Chapter 362. The children of the courtyard could also be considered a characteristic of Wuxia. In the past, the units had to allocate houses and everyone in the unit lived together. Everyone saw each other all day long and their children would naturally play together since they were young. They were the so-called childhood sweethearts. Of course, it would be fine if it was an ordinary unit. The children of the courtyard that people talked about were mostly the children of high-ranking cadres. Their parents either held important positions in various ministries or were cadres above the regimental level. These children grew up together since they were young. There was a clear distinction between who could play with whom and who could oppose whom. In addition, because they had seen a lot since they were young, the children of the courtyard were usually more mature. In this regard, Xianxia had to hesitate. If he put Nian among these children, for her growth, was it good or bad? However, after thinking about it, Xianxia still felt relieved. After all, these children had received different educations since they were young and there were more restrictions in various aspects. If he really wanted to compare, it might be easier to get along with them than children from ordinary families. In short, he would give it a try first. If Nian was unhappy, he would find another place for her. While thinking, Xianxia led the three children into the school. Today was the registration day. The main purpose was to help the children adapt to the environment of the kindergarten. It was not official enrollment yet. Therefore, after Xianxia filled in the form, he led the three children to the classroom under the guidance of the teacher. Since the school was so famous, there must be some skills in the background. Xianxia glanced casually and found that there seemed to be more teachers in the school than there were parents. There were main class teachers, assistant class teachers, auxiliary class teachers, life teachers, care and health teachers. There was everything. Along the way, regardless of whether they knew each other, the teachers were very kind and greeted the three children. Those who did not know would think that they were eating hay de leo. Under the guidance of the teacher, they quickly arrived at the big classroom. The three children did not go to the middle class but came directly to the big class. Such unfamiliar faces naturally attracted the attention of the other parents. Other families usually had one person dragging one person, but Xianxia was dragging three people. In addition, he was a new face, so everyone couldn't help but whisper to each other. "Old Li, have you seen this person before? It looks like a new face. He didn't even come to the parent-teacher meeting yesterday. Didn't you see the enrollment list before? Which unit is he from?" "Ah, now that you mention it, I remember that there were originally only 60 spots for this semester. However, a few days before the start of the semester, 3 spots were forcefully inserted. They didn't even attend the interview and just waited to report." "You didn't even attend the interview? So powerful. Isn't that so? When I brought the child here, I didn't even pass the interview. If it weren't for my uncle, I reckon it would have been over." We begged, and it wasn't easy for us to get a spot. Yet, he casually dragged in 3 people. This is... Sure, you know. After a brief discussion, the 2 parents glanced at each other in tacit understanding. They immediately came up with a plan. There were many small tables in the classroom. 3 to 5 parents gathered around a table with their children. However, similar discussions were constantly taking place at each table. Why do parents nowadays like to let their children go to good schools? Grades were only one of the reasons. The most important thing was, a good school could build better connections for the children, and the importance of these connections could not be compared with a few simple numbers on the report card. Classmate relationships. Only 10 or 20 years later, when everyone had stepped into society, would they deeply realize how valuable this word was. Although everyone was whispering, Xianxia pretended not to hear them. As soon as he entered the classroom, he took the 3 children and sat down according to their nameplates. The children in the kindergarten were still young. Naturally, it was impossible for the children to go on stage and introduce themselves as soon as they entered the classroom. Therefore, they could only wait for the children to adapt before the teachers arranged for them to begin the self-introduction. There were many delicate little toys on the table. As soon as they sat down, the 3 children were attracted by these toys. The teachers were indeed very attentive. They even prepared an exclusive gift bag for each child. The little girl was still very familiar with her name. Therefore, she immediately grabbed the gift box with the words, "Chan Yen," written on it and couldn't wait to open it. Inside was a children's picture book that could be used in both Chinese and English. At the same time, there were many exquisite puzzle toys. Therefore, the The three children immediately gathered together to play like they did in the tea house. There were already 2 children sitting at this table. Seeing that they were so lively, the 2 children went over to play with them. Perhaps because she had stayed in the tea house for a long time, Nian usually played with unfamiliar children. Therefore she did not hesitate. With a wave of her small hand, she very generously invited the 2 children. It was fun with more people. Since the children were playing together, the adults naturally took the opportunity to strike up a conversation. "Bro, are you a dragon phoenix triplet?" The one who spoke was a bespectacled man about the same age as Xianxia. Although the bespectacled man wore casual clothes and spoke casually, he exuded a strong aura. However, he exuded a strong sense of self-confidence, and this kind of self-confidence did not make people feel disgusted. It was as if he was supposed to be like this. After hearing the bespectacled man's words, Xianxia responded with a smile. "No, they are the children of friends. The 2 families are close to each other. They help each other out when they have time." Oh, so that's the case. The bespectacled man did not seem to expect that there would be parents who did not bring their children to the registration day, so he was stunned on the spot. At this time, the middle-aged man next to him who had not spoken suddenly reached out his hand to Xianxia and said, "Hello, my name is Wang Junqing. This is our child, honey." Seeing this, Xianxia had to politely shake hands with him and then respond, "Hello, my name is Xianxia." "Xianxia?" Wang Junqing murmured the name but found that he had no impression of this name at all, so he turned to look at the bespectacled man. Seeing this, the bespectacled man seemed to have received some instructions. The smile on his face suddenly became a lot more enthusiastic. Almost instantly, he reached out his right hand to Xianxia. "Hello, Brother Chen, my name is Zhao Ziyu." Speaking of this, Zhao Ziyu deliberately paused, and then seemed to casually add, "I live in the planning commission courtyard like Brother Wang, so the children of our 2 families are very familiar with each other since young. Generally, we don't play with other children. I didn't expect to get together with your child so quickly today. It seems that they really hit it off. He's just a kid. He can play with anyone." The bespectacled man's words had a deeper meaning, but Xianxia did not seem to understand. After responding lightly, he did not speak anymore. One must know that the courtyard was also divided into different grades. The Planning Commission courtyard was the highest grade courtyard in the entire Wuxia. It was not because of external factors such as geography, environment, living conditions, etc., but because a total of more than 200 top bosses walked out of this courtyard. Any one of them was enough to make Wuxia tremble. The reason why the bespectacled man deliberately revealed to Xianxia was that he really could not understand Xianxia's background, so he wanted to show his cards. If Xianxia's identity was at this level, then everyone could talk happily. If he couldn't reach it, "There are so many seats, please change to another one." In fact, the courtyard was a circle. Chapter 363. After the bespectacled man explained everything to Xianxia, he couldn't help but put on a haughty look. He was confident, but he didn't know that this confidence was meaningless in front of Xianxia. Therefore, after Xianxia chuckled a few times, he acted as if he didn't understand the bespectacled man's words and turned to talk to Wang Junqing about the child. In this spacious and warm classroom, he wasn't a god, nor was he Mr. Chen. He was just a child's father. Seeing that Xianxia didn't play by the rules, Wang Junqing couldn't figure him out for a while. However, he didn't neglect Xianxia because of this. Since he didn't want to talk, then he couldn't blame him for investigating on his own. Therefore, after giving the bespectacled man a look, Wang Junqing followed the topic and started chatting with Xianxia. If you ignored the content of their conversation, the atmosphere was similar to a business gathering. Just a few glasses of wine and there would be a harmonious atmosphere of drinking and chatting. Perhaps it was because they were accompanied by their parents, the children quickly adapted to the classroom environment, and then they began to play freely. A few of them were lively and started to clamor about going outside to play on the slide. Seeing that the atmosphere was lively enough, the teacher came to the center of the classroom and kindly asked the children to stand up one by one. Then, she guided them to start introducing themselves. It was the little girl's first time facing such a situation, so she was naturally a little embarrassed when it was her turn. Under Xianxia's constant encouragement, the little girl finally mustered up the courage to stand up and say timidly, My name is Chen Yan. I'm 5 years old this year." It was just a few simple words, but she stuttered as if she was stuttering. After saying that, The little girl immediately shut her mouth and stood there timidly, not knowing what to do. Very good. From today onwards, Chen Yan is a member of our big family. Come, let's welcome her together. Welcome the new student. After saying that, the teacher took the lead and applauded. When the children saw this, they followed the teacher's example and clapped while shouting, "Welcome the new student." Speaking of which, this was the first time in Yan Yan's life that she had officially integrated into a group. That strange feeling immediately made her feel a little overwhelmed, so she could only lower her head and constantly tug at the corner of her clothes with her hands. That shy and bashful look on her face was extremely adorable. After she pulled her back to her seat, the little thing slowly opened her eyes again. Then she carefully listened to each student's self-introduction, and under the guidance of the teacher, she kept applauding. It looked like she was trying to integrate herself into this new group. The little girl was already so nervous, not to mention the brothers. Of course. When it was Wenwen's self-introduction, he actually said, My name is Xia Ming." When he heard this, he corrected him. "Xia, don't believe him. He's Xiaowen. Xia Ming." "My Xia," the older brother instinctively retorted. Then, as if he suddenly came back to his senses, he couldn't help but mumble weakly, No, I'm Xia Wen, he's Xia Ming." The twins were extremely eye-catching wherever they went. When the two brothers made such a scene, all the parents present were immediately amused and laughed. The other children looked at them in confusion. They really didn't understand what was going on. How could two people in this world look exactly the same? Everyone looked at the brothers curiously. The differences in the brothers' personalities were completely on display here. The older brother, who had always been shrewd and never let himself be taken advantage of, was now blushing like a monkey's butt. The younger brother, who had always been simple and honest, was not at all timid in the face of everyone's stares. Instead, he was complaining that his older brother was using his identity. The two brothers were like two pistachios, immediately making everyone laugh out loud. Just like that, Xianxia led the three children into the capital city's second-generation circle, and the curtains slowly began on the three children's school days. After all, kindergarten life was quite relaxing. Perhaps because of the brothers' company, the little girl didn't cry from beginning to end. Sometimes, she even took the initiative to say that she wanted to go to kindergarten. Xianxia said that the little girl would take the school bus by herself, but when it was time to go to school, he still personally picked her up and sent her to school every day. At the same time, he also instructed Big Cat to wait outside the kindergarten gate at all times. From this, it could be seen that he really cared for Yan Yan to the extreme. When life was on the right track, time seemed to pass much faster. In the blink of an eye, it was National Day again. It was cold in the north, and at this time, people all wrapped up their jackets. There was no military parade this year, so naturally, there were fewer tourists in Shangjing than in previous years. It was still the large courtyard, but compared to the desolation of previous years, the Qin family's courtyard was particularly lively this year. Early in the morning, Gu Lao took the brothers to the courtyard. Xiao Yuan was busy moving out all the tables and chairs in the house, while her sister-in-law and Qin Yongyan sat in the main hall to discuss their own understanding. Even Qin Ruing, who hadn't shown up for a long time. Today, she finally got Xi's permission to make an exception and take a day off. In fact, since the family of three returned from Daiyu Island, Qin Ruing became the one who worked the hardest. She was cultivating in seclusion almost all the time. Her sister-in-law's dizziness wasn't very obvious because she had already stepped into the celestial being realm. Therefore, Xianxia came to a conclusion. This symptom might be effectively suppressed with the improvement of her cultivation base. In this case, he naturally had to urge Qin Ruing to cultivate diligently at all times. After all, he had already destroyed the Sundial Brilliance Temple. Without the blessing of 8 times the time difference, Qin Ruing could only rely on her own efforts. Unfortunately, her talent wasn't good, so she could only work harder than ordinary people. And this was the fundamental reason why Qin Ruing had been living in seclusion recently. Today's weather was good. The chill of early autumn was swept away by the warm sunshine. The autumn air was refreshing, and the clouds were light and the wind was light. Everything was so tranquil, just like Xi's mood at the moment. The couple stood side by side on the steps of the west wing. Looking at the three lively and cute little guys, the corners of their mouths couldn't help but reveal a faint smile. However, life was like a train. After arriving at this station, there was still the next station. Xianxia wasn't even ready to welcome the next station when the train suddenly stopped here. In just a moment, the figures of his sister-in-law and Qin Yongyan suddenly appeared on the steps outside the main hall, and Xianxia immediately held Qin Ruoying's hand. In addition to the three children who were still fooling around, even Gu Lao and Xiao Yuan noticed the strangeness and couldn't help but immediately look up at the sky. They saw that the sky that was still bright and beautiful just a moment ago had been shrouded by large dark clouds in the blink of an eye. It was clearly 10 o'clock in the morning, but the sky was gloomy as if night had fallen. The speed of change was simply puzzling. Why did the weather suddenly change? Gu Lao looked at the sky in surprise and immediately stood up. Then he quickly said to Xiao Yuan, "It looks like it's going to rain. Quick, let's put away the tables and chairs." However, as soon as Gu Lao's voice fell, bean-sized raindrops suddenly fell from the sky. Like a summer shower, the dense raindrops continued to fall from the sky. Almost instantly, Gu Lao and Xiao Yuan became drowned rats. And at this moment, Chen Shi, who was standing on the steps, suddenly reached his hand into the rain and then opened his palm, allowing the raindrops to constantly hit his palm. Feeling the surging spiritual energy contained in the rain, Chen Shi's brows almost instantly twisted into the shape of the Chinese character Sichuan. What kind of shower was this? This was simply an unprecedented tide of spiritual energy. Spiritual energy liquefied, benefiting the common people. This was Chapter 364. Rain moistens all things and nourishes the common people. In this bleak and cold late autumn, a sudden downpour instantly extinguished everyone's rising spirits because of the National Day holiday. Heavy rain was always accompanied by strong winds, and this was the north. When the heavy rain came down, it immediately drenched people from top to bottom. On the streets of the capital, people hid under the eaves and shivered. Everyone was hoping that the rain would stop, but they didn't know that this rain, it was actually a blessing bestowed by God to all things. From the moment the rain started to fall, the big cat was like a clockwork doll that had been activated, running wildly in the rain. Big Head, who had always been trapped in the fish tank and couldn't go anywhere, jumped out of the fish tank like a fish leaping through the dragon gate. Then, through his own hard struggle, he finally jumped into the heavy rain. For most children, being in the rain was always a very fun thing to do, and the three little guys were no exception. At first, the brothers were a little restrained because Gu Lao was present. However, Nianyan looked back at Chen Shi and found that her parents' attention was on the sky. She rushed into the heavy rain and then jumped around the yard with the big cat. She stepped on the water in the yard like a Peppa Pig who liked to step on mud. Her little face was full of excited smiles. The rain drenched her hair, and the line of water almost blurred her eyes, but this made her even happier. Under the constant urging of the little guy, the brothers finally couldn't resist the temptation. The two glanced at Gu Lao, who had just rushed up the steps to hide from the rain, and then jumped into the heavy rain like a wisp of smoke. In the heavy rain in the yard, the three little guys laughed happily. At this time, Gu Lao suddenly came back to his senses. But when he was about to scold the brothers, Chen Shi's voice suddenly sounded in his ear. "Let them play for a while. A little rain won't be a problem. There's heating at home. If it's cold, they'll know to come back." Seeing how happy the three children were, coupled with Chen Shi's persuasion, Gu Lao's lips moved a few times, but in the end, he didn't interrupt them. The heavy rain poured down, washing away the hustle and bustle of the entire city. It was as if the only sound left in the world was the sound of the rain. It was a feast and a carnival. Under Chen Shi's signal, Qin Ruoying also walked into the heavy rain step by step. Shangjing rarely rained, so there was a lot of dust and impurities accumulated in the clouds. When it landed on one's body, there was a sticky feeling. But today's rain was different. Although it was a little cold, the rainwater was exceptionally clear and pure, giving people a comfortable feeling all over their bodies. Spiritual energy turned into rain. Even for Chen Shi, this was the first time he had seen such a situation. For a moment, he couldn't help but walk into the rain and began to wantonly plunder the spiritual energy. Rain after a long drought is truly a blessing in life. However, just when everyone was celebrating because of the rain, Qin Ruoying suddenly felt her legs go soft and she staggered. If Chen Shi hadn't caught her in time, she would have fallen into the puddles on the ground. "Ying Ying? What's wrong?" My head is a little dizzy. Qin Ruing covered her forehead. Her originally rosy face was stained with a layer of white frost, looking as if she was sick. At this time, Qin Shueqing also seemed to feel something, and couldn't help but blurt out to Chen Shi, "It's here again, that feeling." After saying that, even she covered her forehead with a look of discomfort. Qin Shueqing was already a celestial, but even she was so uncomfortable, one could imagine what kind of experience Qin Ruing was experiencing at this moment. Chen Shi nervously supported Qin Ruing, and at the same time constantly poured his true essence into her, trying to ease her symptoms. Why did she feel dizzy? Chen Shi seriously considered all the possibilities. Suddenly, a thought flashed through Chen Shi's mind. It wasn't the first time Qin Ruing felt dizzy. Whenever this happened, it must be when the tide of spiritual energy was surging. Was it because of the tide of spiritual energy? It obviously wasn't. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth was always the most important thing to cultivators, so how could it cause discomfort? Since natural factors were ruled out, only man-made factors were left. In addition to the information he had obtained on Daiyu Island, Chen Shi could almost conclude that this definitely had something to do with the sky-bearing technique and the floating dawn mirror. If he guessed correctly, such a huge tide of spiritual energy had appeared on Earth, so the people behind the Divine Gate wanted to use it to open the Divine Gate. But because he had already destroyed the 5 holy temples, the Divine Gate hadn't been opened. The Divine Gate, the holy temples, the tide of spiritual energy, Siming Xian knew, the sky-bearing technique and the floating dawn mirror. Everything was actually closely related. Just as Chen Shi was pondering the root of the problem, Qin Ruing seemed to have suddenly seen something. She looked up at the sky and muttered, "Shi, I see it. There are people in the sky. They want to come down." As soon as she finished speaking, her body went limp and she completely fainted. Ying. The sudden change really shocked Chen Shi. He almost instantly carried Qin Ruing back to the West Wing. Looking at the unconscious Qin Ruing lying on the bed, Chen Shi's mood fell to the bottom. At this moment, Qin Shueqing also rushed into the West Wing. Then she said to Chen Shi with a pained expression, "I saw someone holding a mirror, and then he kept talking to the mirror. I could hear his voice, but I couldn't hear what he was saying at all." Qin Shueqing's expression was very pained. She looked like she was drunk, and she was trembling as she walked. "Mirror?" Chen Shi repeated this word. When he was about to ask, Qin Shueqing shook her head and muttered, "I can't, my head is so dizzy. Let me sleep for a while." After saying that, she fell on the bed and lay side by side with Qin Ruing. Looking at the 2 sisters who had fainted on the bed, Chen Shi was silent. He carefully checked the physical condition of the 2, and found that their physiological functions were all normal. There were no signs of disorder in the vital essence in their bodies. It was as if they were sleeping peacefully. After a long while, when Chen Shi was sure that the 2 of them were not in any danger, he gently kissed Qin Ruing's forehead. Then, he got up and walked out of the West Wing. It was still raining heavily outside. The 3 little guys were still jumping excitedly in the rain. Chen Shi subconsciously glanced in the direction of the main hall, but just happened to meet Qin Yongyan's gaze. Obviously, his father-in-law also noticed something strange. But due to his limited ability, he could only put all his hopes on Chen Shi. Chen Shi nodded slightly at Qin Yongyan. Then, Chapter 365. Above the sky, amidst the dark clouds, Chen Shi silently sensed all the tiny movements around him. A massive spirit energy tide that he had never seen or heard of before was surging wantonly in front of his eyes. It was only at this moment that Chen Shi suddenly realized. The area covered by this rain was too large. If one stood on the moon and looked at the earth, they could clearly see. The entire northeastern hemisphere was shrouded in huge cloud cyclones one after another. From the Malay archipelago in the south to Siberia in the north, almost half of Asia was covered by these huge cloud cyclones. The center of each cyclone was the place with the densest spirit energy. At a rough count, there were at least 7 or 8 cyclones. There was one in Shangjing, one in Qinling, one in Donghai, one in Karakoram, one in Taklamakan. Everywhere that had appeared before, a spirit energy tide appeared at the same time today. In other words, if the divine gate suddenly opened, it would definitely appear in these places. Usually, it would come one by one, but today, so many appeared at the same time. What was the secret behind it? Chen Shi didn't know, and he was too lazy to think about it. Because at this moment, there was only one thought left in his mind, and that was, completely block the divine gate. For Ying, for Nian, for their family of 3 to live a happy and stable life. Since opening the divine gate required a huge amount of spirit energy, then he wanted the spirit energy tide to never appear. From now on, he would be the dragon breaking stone that stood between the 2 worlds. Wherever the spirit energy tide appeared, he would definitely be there. He wanted to completely cut off any connection between the 2 worlds. Disperse! This rain was not accompanied by lightning or thunder, but after Xianxia roared at the sky, a series of deafening rolling thunder suddenly sounded in the sky. Boom! In an instant, the sky was like an army of thousands of soldiers and horses facing the enemy. The sound of drums was endless and rumbling. With Xianxia as the center, a cyclone began to expand rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. Because it was spinning too fast, there were even white stripes visible to the naked eye on the inner wall of the cyclone. These stripes were like sharp blades, forming a meat grinder, enough to tear anything caught in the cyclone into pieces. The sky wailed, and the dark clouds roared in anger. Accompanied by the incessant flashes of lightning and rumbles of thunder, Xianxia was like a black hole, pulling in all the clouds and cyclones in the world and sucking them in bit by bit. This was the true power of the divine transformation stage. When Xianxia went all out, he could affect every corner of this planet. At this moment, he was like a Tao Tai from ancient times. He opened his mouth and crazily devoured the spiritual energy of heaven and earth on earth. Because only in this way could he immediately calm down the raging tide of spiritual energy. Unfortunately, Xianxia had overestimated himself. After all, Earth was no longer the dead planet of the last days that didn't even have a celestial being. After tens of thousands of years of silence, this decaying cultivation planet finally glowed with new vitality. The tide of spiritual energy was the beginning of everything. This was not something that Xianxia could stop by himself. Under the wheels of the Great Era, he was like a mantis that stretched out its arms to stop the car from moving forward. Even if he had to die, he would not hesitate. Ah! After Xianxia let out a long roar, a huge figure suddenly appeared behind him. It was the Dhamma form. It looked just like him, but its body was more than 20 meters tall. It stood proudly in the sky like a god. Surging spiritual energy continued to surge into his body. Xianxia was like a balloon that was constantly inflating. There would be a time when he could not bear it anymore. Therefore, he urgently needed a channel to vent. This world, unsurprisingly, it became the channel for him to vent. In the blink of an eye, countless sword lights shot out, targeting the center of the cyclones one after another. Boom! Boom! Wherever the sword auras went, there would be a thunderous explosion in the air. For a moment, more than half of Asia was filled with earth-shattering thunder. Boom! Boom! The sword auras covered 30,000 miles, and one sword aura chilled 19 continents. If the heavens were in my way, I would smash the heavens. If the earth was in my way, I would flatten the earth. Xianxia crazily grasped the spiritual energy of heaven and earth while constantly detonating the center of the cyclones with the sword auras, trying to stop the tide from surging at the root. A big ship sank because of a small hole. 100 feet dike collapsed because of an ant's nest. The method Xianxia used seemed violent, but in fact, it was simple and effective. After his desperate series of attacks, the surging tide of spiritual energy was forcibly contained by him. The tide gradually receded, and the clouds and cyclones dissipated one by one. The dark clouds in the sky also dispersed, and the warm sun shone on the earth again. At this time, Xianxia's pale face showed a smile with difficulty. It was finally calm. However, just as Xianxia dragged his tired body and was about to return to Shangjing, a voice full of anger suddenly rang in his ears. "It's you! How dare you destroy the sacred ancestors' foundation? You're blocking my way to Tiandu. Hateful, hateful, hateful." This person's tone was filled with incomparable resentment, as if he had a grudge against Xianxia for killing his father and stealing his wife. In the 3 hateful words in a row, there was an undisguised killing intent. This enmity was absolutely irreconcilable. After hearing this voice, Xianxia was a little confused for a moment. Because this voice came out of nowhere, intermittent, and sounded a little strange, as if a voice changer was turned on, causing the voice to be distorted. However, Xianxia still understood this person's words. In this regard, Xianxia was unexpectedly mischievous. He imitated Feng Tangjing in the 9th grade Sesame official, and shouted towards the sky with a cheeky face. Not satisfied? Come and hit me, come and hit me. As he spoke, he twisted and turned in the air proudly. In fact, Xianxia wasn't sure if the other party could hear his ridicule. Since the other party couldn't pass through the void and directly pressed him to the ground and beat him up, then this person definitely couldn't be the Tai Ching's sacred ancestor. This person's cultivation was probably about the same as his, but the other party had touched the threshold of the word void, so he could directly talk to him from the great world. You little thief! I'm so angry. Today, I swear that when the generals of Tiandu return, it will be the time to tear you into pieces. Remember this. Hearing this, Xianxia laughed disdainfully. Immediately after, he acted out of character and directly raised his middle finger towards the sky. At the same time, he didn't forget to ridicule. Remember this, my ass. Obviously, that person was so angry that he couldn't speak, so he could only let out a roar of anger and helplessness. However, at this moment, the last cloud cyclone completely dissipated. The tide of spirit qi receded. That person's voice stopped abruptly, as if it had never appeared. Everything returned to silence. Xianxia immediately withdrew the smile on his face. Chapter 366. This sudden thunderstorm also cooled down the excitement of the National Day celebration. As soon as Xianxia stepped through the Chuehua gate, the little fellow, who was playing hide-and-seek with the two brothers in the yard, focused on him. Then, the little thing's eyes immediately lit up. Papa! Where did you go? As she spoke, she ran excitedly to Xianxia. The cute way she ran looked like a puppy at home. When she saw her owner come back, she would enthusiastically rush up and wag her tail. Of course, Nian was not a puppy. She was the most precious treasure in the world. Papa just went out because he had something to do. How was it? Did you have fun? Yes, I like the rain. It's fun. What's fun? Look at your clothes. They're soaking wet. Don't you feel cold? Hearing this, the little thing immediately shook her head like a rattledrum, and then said with certainty, Not cold. You're really not cold? Not cold. Looking at the little fellow's resolute look, it seemed that she really did not feel cold. However, as soon as the little fellow's voice fell, a cold wind suddenly blew over from nowhere. Her clothes were already a little wet, and after being blown by the cold wind, she could not help but shiver. Well, now she knew it was cold. The little fellow subconsciously pressed her body close to Xianxia's chest, and then could not help but whisper, It seems a little cold. It's good that you know it's cold. Don't play outside for too long when it rains, or the cold air will get into your body and make you sick. If you get sick, you have to take very bitter medicine. Do you understand? Understood. The little fellow had not taken medicine for a long time. But when Xianxia mentioned the word medicine, she immediately recalled the bitter feeling, and her little nose wrinkled. Let's go take a shower and change clothes. After the purpose of educating was achieved, Xianxia held the little fellow and called the two brothers to follow him into the west wing. As soon as she entered the door, the little fellow saw Qin Ruing and Qin Xueching lying on the bed, so she immediately warned them in a low voice. Shoo! Mama is sleeping. Don't disturb her. All right. The two brothers nodded in unison, then tiptoed into the bathroom. After all, Nian was a girl. Xianxia naturally couldn't let her take a bath with the two brothers, so he had to wash the two brothers first before it was the little fellow's turn. Although Xianxia's mood wasn't very good at the moment, but when facing the three children, he still showed enough patience. Even though the two brothers were very naughty when they were bathing, Xianxia did not vent his anger on them. Children were always carefree. No matter what the situation was, happiness would always be the first thing in their hearts. Therefore, more than half an hour had passed by the time Xianxia helped the three little fellows wash up, and their clothes were dried by Xianxia with Zhenqi. Okay, go out and play. Wait, what do you want to eat tonight? Dad will make it for you later. Braised pork ribs. After casually throwing out such a sentence, the little fellow hurriedly ran out of the west wing. Okay, got it. After Xianxia responded with a smile, he slowly walked to Qin Ruoying's side. Looking at his lover lying quietly on the bed, Xianxia couldn't help but gently leave a kiss on her forehead. After a kiss, the sister-in-law next to him suddenly made a soft moan, as if she had a nightmare. Xianxia was about to reach out to check the situation, but Qin Shueqing jumped up from the bed like a frightened cheetah, and then kicked Xianxi's head. "Stop. It's me." In front of Xianxia, the sister-in-law would never have any possibility of resistance. He just casually glared at Qin Shueqing, and Qin Shueqing suddenly fell on the bed like a robot without power. "Let's talk. What did you see before you fainted?" The sister-in-law was a celestial being, and her foundation was much thicker than Qin Ruing's, so the information she provided was naturally more useful. After Qin Shueqing was pressed on the bed by Xianxia, she was completely awake. The sister-in-law twisted her body and found that she couldn't move, so she couldn't help but blush and scold Xianxia. "Hey, let go of me." "But this tone. Why does it sound a little strange? Get up. Do you want to drink water?" "No." Qin Shueqing seemed to dislike the feeling of being controlled by Xianxia, so her attitude wasn't very good after she got up. But when she saw Qin Ruing, the expression on her face slightly stiffened. Then Qin Shueqing quickly shifted her gaze to the window and then said, "I saw a lot of people. Those people seemed to be walking on clouds and flying in the sky, and they were wearing very strange clothes, a bit like ancient people. Behind them was a very, very big palace, even bigger than the Forbidden City. They were all looking at me. Maybe they weren't looking at me. Anyway, from my point of view, they were looking at me. I saw the hostility in their eyes. And the murderous intent. I don't know how to describe that feeling to you. At that moment, I felt like Sun Wukong, who wreaked havoc in heaven, standing outside the southern heavenly gate, facing the gods and Buddhas in the sky alone." Qin Shueqing frowned, trying hard to recall the scene she saw at that time. When Xianxia heard this last sentence, the corner of his mouth suddenly hooked up into a shallow arc. "They weren't looking at you, they were looking at me." "Looking at you? Why would they look at you?" After hearing Xianxi's words, Qin Shueqing shifted her gaze to him. She was really confused now, and really didn't understand the situation. Why did she suddenly faint? The people she saw in the dream. Who exactly were they? His sister-in-law was confused, but Xianxia had no intention of explaining. He leaned over and touched Qin Ruing's cheek, then immediately got up and walked straight out of the door. "I'm going out first. If she wakes up early, remember to tell her I'll be back soon." Qin Shueqing felt that something was wrong with Xianxia, and suddenly couldn't help but blurt out, "Wait. Where are you going?" Xianxia stopped in his tracks. Qin Shueqing looked at him, and then added in a slight panic, "You didn't even tell me where you were going. How can I tell my sister where you're going?" Seeing that his sister-in-law was so concerned, Xianxia had to soften his tone, and smiled at her. "Don't worry, I'm just going to Daiyu Island to get something. I'll be back soon." Chapter 367. Daiyu Island. Heron Island, the pavilion in the middle of the lake. As the saying goes, the cicada senses the golden wind before it moves, sending the impermanence of death without knowing it. Ever since Jiang Zhengqing was injured by that outsider who came out of nowhere, the sky above Daiyu Island seemed to be shrouded in thick dark clouds. Everyone in the clan was anxious, and the atmosphere was gloomy. Everyone seemed to be more cautious than usual. As the clan leader, Jiang Yuankue did not step forward to appease everyone at such a critical time. Instead, he stayed on Heron Island all day, doing something unknown. Everyone thought that the clan leader was planning something big, but no one knew. Jiang Yuankue himself was confused. Apart from preserving the most complete inheritance, the Jiang clan also had an immortal old monster who had lived for thousands of years. Based on this alone, Daiyu Island was destined to have too many secrets that no one knew. The great ancestor's seniority was there. Once the old man spoke, Jiang Yuankue naturally had to bow and listen. The great ancestor's words were simple. He wanted him to wait outside the pavilion in the middle of the lake and wait patiently for the fated person to appear. The fated person? Who was the fated person? Who was the fated person? The great ancestor's words must have a deeper meaning, so Jiang Yuankue had been thinking about this question for the past few days. However, no matter how hard he thought about it, he could not come up with a reliable answer. Until this day, a sudden tide of spiritual energy enveloped the entire world. As the place with the densest spiritual energy within 100 miles, a cloud vortex inevitably appeared in the sky above Daiyu Island. This scene was very similar to the scene described in Immortals at the Magpie Bridge. When the golden wind and the jade dew meet, it surpasses countless things in the human world. It was only at this moment that Jiang Yuankui suddenly realized. The sky had changed. Sure enough, when sword rays streaked across the sky and shot toward the vortex from afar, Jiang Yuankui finally understood who the fated person the great ancestor was talking about was. In this world, there was actually someone who was unwilling to ascend to the great world, and was instead trying his best to stop the divine gate from opening, going against the entire great world with his own strength. What kind of courage was this? Even Jiang Yuankui could not help but be fascinated. However, Jiang Yuankui was the clan leader after all. He had to think carefully about everything. Therefore, in the next moment, a thought suddenly popped up in his mind. If the divine gate could not be opened, who was the biggest beneficiary? Weren't they the 5 lands of legacy? Even though the old ancestor had never explicitly mentioned it, Jiang Yuankui was keenly aware of the problem at this moment. When the spirit qi on Earth began to recover, what was the difference between Earth and the Great World? The desert had already become an oasis, so why would the people need to migrate again? On Earth, they were the high and mighty Jiang clan. But in the Great World, they were sinners who were as lowly as ants. Since that was the case, why was the Jiang clan still anxiously waiting for the gate of heaven to open? Isn't it good to stay on Earth? Thinking of this, Jiang Yuankui couldn't help but look back at the pavilion in the middle of the lake. His face suddenly revealed a complicated expression of worry and joy. Could it be? The elder ancestor really had such a plan? Jiang Yuankui stood at the bridgehead, letting his imagination run wild. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the sky above Daiyu Island. Following that, he passed through the formation at an extremely fast speed and landed outside the pavilion in the middle of the lake. Only when that person opened the door curtain and made a slight movement did Jiang Yuankui's heart suddenly tremble. He quickly turned around and angrily shouted, "Who is it? How dare you trespass into the forbidden area of my clan?" However, before he could step forward to stop him, the elder ancestor's voice slowly came from the house. "Yuankui, you can leave first." Hearing this, Jiang Yuankui couldn't help but stop. He quickly bowed and replied, "Yes. Also, pass on my order. Ring the 9-dragon bell and summon all the elders in the clan. I have something important to announce to everyone." 9-dragon bell? Hearing this, Jiang Yuankui subconsciously opened his eyes wide. He even suspected that he had heard wrongly. The elder ancestor seemed to have noticed his abnormality, so he spoke again to confirm it. "Go, ring the 9-dragon bell." "Yes, elder ancestor." This time, he finally heard it clearly. Therefore, Jiang Yuankui immediately went to the bell tower by the lake. After taking a deep breath, he was full of excitement. He pushed the hammer hard and rang the ancient bronze bell in front of him that hadn't been rung for thousands of years. Dong, dong, dong. The heavy and distant sound of the bell suddenly rang out, startling tens of thousands of birds on the island. Before the bell rang for the 9th time, the bridge outside the pavilion in the middle of the lake was already densely packed with people. Among these people, the ones with the lowest cultivation were diviners. Among them were Jiang Yuankui's father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and the various Jiang clan ancestors. It was obvious that they were the core strength of the Jiang clan. These people used to represent the glory of the Jiang clan, but now they were representing the future of the Jiang clan. With the continuous recovery of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, the shackles of heaven and earth had been completely broken. In this short 1 year, many diviners had appeared in the Jiang clan. Among them, there were even those above diviners led by Jiang Zhengqing. The future had come, and it had arrived. The Jiang clan was like a ferocious beast entrenched on Daiyu Island. At this moment, it finally revealed its ferocious and terrifying true face. Among the people by the lake, Jiang Yuankui's seniority was the lowest. However, due to his status as the current patriarch, Jiang Yuankui was fortunate enough to stand in the first row of the bridge. The entire place was silent. One could hear a pin drop. Everyone lowered their heads and ears, quietly waiting for the old ancestor to speak. No one knew who the old ancestor was talking to, nor did they know the content of their conversation. In short, after a long time, the old ancestor's voice suddenly rang out, instantly shaking everyone's hearts. "I am Jiang Yan, the 17th generation patriarch of the Jiang clan. Today I declare, The Jiang clan will form an alliance with Mr. Chen and fight against Tiandu together. In ancient times, what crime did the Jiang clan commit? But the divine ancestor, for his own selfish reasons, listed our Jiang clan as sinners and suffered the pain of being trapped for 10,000 years. However, there is no need for such a crime. Today, we will follow Mr. Chen to expel the heavenly gate and break off Tiandu's path of retreat in order to protect our homeland. This is to inherit the legacy of our ancestors, where righteousness lies. All the clansmen of the Jiang clan should take this as their responsibility. Everyone knows this. This sudden declaration of war instantly stupefied all of the Jiang clan clansmen present. The old ancestor wanted to crusade against Tiandu. Didn't the clan often offer sacrifices and pray for Tiandu to open a door so that the clansmen could ascend to the great world? Why did he suddenly want to rebel and go against Tiandu with the banner of Tiandu? Perhaps because the news came too suddenly, everyone was unable to accept it for a while. Many hot-tempered clansmen risked disobeying the old ancestor and kept asking why in a loud voice. One had to know that the great world was the immortal world that everyone dreamed of. What was the purpose of a person's life? If it weren't for the limited conditions on Earth, how could they be trapped in the heavenly realm? Only by going to the great world would they have the possibility of continuing to break through. Only by going to the great world and improving their realm could they live for another 100, 200, or even 1,000 years. Everyone had long had enough of being unable to break through because of the shackles of heaven and earth. It wasn't that they couldn't do it, but that the conditions didn't allow it. And this was the fundamental reason why people felt sad. The crowd was restless. Everyone was questioning the old ancestor's decision. Chapter 368. A hint of surprise flashed across everyone's faces when they saw the young man who suddenly walked out of the pavilion in the middle of the lake. It was true that cultivators could retain their youth forever and even regain their youthful vigor, but this was based on a strong foundation of cultivation. The person in front of them looked so young, which meant he was either a young man who was still wet behind the ears or an old man who had been through a lot. The former was almost impossible, so only the latter was left. Is this the Mr. Chen who injured Xianxia? I think so. I was a little late that day. When I got there, the elder ancestor had already asked him to move to Heron Island, so I only saw his back. But looking at this figure, this should be Mr. Chen without a doubt. I heard that Xianxia couldn't even take one hit from this person. Is this true? Yes, Xianxia probably underestimated his opponent. After all, he just broke through to the above divinity stage, so it's inevitable that he's a little impetuous. Based on Mr. Chen's previous battle record, this person should have already stepped into the above divinity stage. It makes sense that he could easily defeat Xianxia. I see. Everyone whispered to each other. At the same time, they had their own thoughts, but no one expressed them. Everyone heard the elder ancestor's words, but whether they agreed or not was another matter. Forming an alliance with Mr. Chen to fight against Heaven Capital? Putting aside the fact that Mr. Chen dared to make an enemy out of Heaven Capital, just the Jiang clan alone. Could it really be that they could wrestle with the ancient cultivators in the Great World? Any random divine general who came out of the Divine Gate could probably clean up Daiyu Island from top to bottom. In fact, even Chen she felt that this was a little unbelievable. He had only come to ask the elder ancestor for the 500-year-old ginseng flower, hoping to use it to heal the internal injuries on his body. But he did not expect. When the elder ancestor confirmed that he was the one who defeated this rare spirit tide, he immediately expressed that he wanted to form an alliance with him to stop the Divine Gate from opening. What was going on? After thinking about it seriously, Chen Shi finally understood the elder ancestor's intentions. On Earth, the Jiang clan was one of the 5 great lands of heritage respected by everyone. But in the Great World, the Jiang clan was the descendant of a sinner who didn't even have the qualifications to enter the sect. It was a very simple multiple-choice question. Wasn't it? However, due to the slave nature of his subconscious mind, even Chen Shi felt that going against the Great World was simply courting death. Instead, it was this old man who had lived for over 1,000 years who saw through the essence of it at a glance and made the most correct choice, blocking the heavenly gate and separating the 2 realms. Only in this way would the Jiang clan truly welcome its own glory. But unfortunately, the truth is always in the hands of the minority. Chen Shi stood at the head of the bridge and silently sized up the people in front of him. However, these people were looking at him with hostile gazes. She didn't have any reaction to this. Because he knew someone would stand up for him. As expected. Just as the crowd was discussing animatedly, a stern shout exploded in everyone's ears like a sudden clap of thunder. Lonesome. A bunch of short-sighted people. If it weren't for the fact that I already have half a foot in the yellow spring, why would I place such high hopes on you people? This old man has lived for over 1,000 years and has long seen the change of dynasties and the change of masters of mountains and rivers. You people count on the heavenly gate to ascend, but the heavenly gate hasn't opened for a long time. Now that it opens again and again, you people don't reflect on the deeper meaning behind it. Instead, you are like hungry dogs begging for food, wishing that you could ascend immediately. Those who have such thoughts are truly ignorant, short-sighted, unable to distinguish right from wrong, and causing harm in the evening. This old man stands here today to tell you all. Misfortune is a blessing in disguise, and a blessing in disguise. Thousands of years have passed, and circumstances have changed with the passage of time. China has been restored, and the spiritual energy is torrential. You people count on ascending to the upper realm, but you don't know that the people of the upper realm. I also want to return to the divine great land and fight against you all. As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked. The ancient cultivators were coming back? Why? Why? Wasn't it because the great world was just a crack in the depths of the universe? Therefore, there was actually a fundamental difference between it and Earth. Earth was a planet with life, a holy land for cultivation. Even if there was a period of time when the spirit chi was weak, this situation was only temporary. However, this short period of time might be very long for humans. It could be thousands of years or tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years. But for a planet with a lifespan of 10 billion years, 1 million years was too short, and 10 million years was too short. Even 100 million years only occupied 1% of its lifespan. And the great world? It was just a crack in the void, and it might suddenly close one day. Without the constant support of a planet with life, no matter how rich the spiritual energy in the great world was, there would be a day when it would be exhausted. They were both spiritual energy, but one was a renewable resource, and the other was a non-renewable resource. The difference between the two was like heaven and earth. Humans had to learn to be vigilant in times of peace. Therefore, the main point was not whether the spiritual energy in the great world was exhausted, but the spiritual energy on Earth had begun to recover. Since that was the case, why not return to Earth in advance to preserve the resources of the great world and deal with the next age of chaos? Therefore, just as the person behind the heavenly gate said, the return of Tiandu, it had to be done. The reason why the old man was able to see through this before she was because his thoughts were different from hers. She only wanted a family of 3 to live a peaceful life, while the old man wanted to take advantage of the situation and rise up in response to the heavens, thereby changing the fate of the Jianghu family in one fell swoop. If they could really cut off the connection between the two worlds, then from now on, the Jianghu family would be the most powerful legacy force in the world. Tens of thousands of years of accumulation, it was time to welcome the day when it would explode. Perhaps because there was an outsider like Shi present, the old man's lecture did not last for too long, and many of his words were not that straightforward. However, since he had already flipped out, naturally, no one dared to jump out and question him. The scene quickly quieted down, and everyone lowered their heads, pretending to be docile. A gentle breeze blew, ruffling the calm surface of the lake. After a long while, the old man's voice sounded again. Yuan Kuei, pass on my command. Open the seal, pluck the Adumbra flower, and give it to Mr. Chen. Ah! Jiang Yuan Kuei was stunned for a moment, somewhat doubting whether he had heard wrongly. The Adumbra flower. As long as one was a member of the Jiang family, there was not a single person who had not imagined that they would be the fated person for this flower. Jiang Zhengqing had dared to force Jiang Yuan Kuei to hand over the Adumbra flower during the clan's sacrifice ceremony because he had relied on his cultivation above the heavenly man level and was certain that the elder ancestor would not do anything to him. After all, one should not let one's own fertile water flow into one's own fields. But now, the elder ancestor wanted to give this rare flower to an outsider. Could it be that he had heard wrongly? Jiang Yuan Kuei was completely dumbfounded, so after hearing the old man's words, he still stood in the same spot, unmoving. However, before the Jiang family members present could voice their doubts, the old man's voice rang out again. Ancestor Yushan left behind this Adumbra flower before he ascended, and left a prophecy. This flower belongs to the fated person. Since the fated person has already been found, then it's time to pluck this flower. Go, pass on my command, give the Adumbra flower to Mr. Chen. Chapter 369. The Adumbra Flower. Upon hearing these words, even Chen she couldn't help but reveal an astonished expression. He really didn't expect that the Adumbra flower would exist on Earth. The words of the Adumbra flower were auspicious. It only appeared once every 3,000 years and was a heavenly flower that didn't exist in this world. But in reality, the Adumbra flower's seedlings weren't very rare. What was truly rare was its 3,000-year flowering period. A whole 3,000 years. One had to know that with Chen Shi's current cultivation, he could barely live for 2,000 years. But this Adumbra flower needed 3,000 years of cultivation before it could fully mature and bloom. Just based on this growth period alone, it was destined that this strange flower would have extraordinary effects. According to the rumors in the pugilistic world, even if an ordinary person consumed this flower, he or she would be able to become an immortal and ascend to the heavens. He or she would immediately live as long as the heavens and the earth and be as old as the sun and moon. Of course, this was just an unreliable rumor. When Chen Shi was in the heavenly spiral continent, he had heard that a mature Adumbra flower had appeared in the north. During that time, countless immortal cultivators rushed to the north almost every day in an attempt to obtain this flower. This flower was like a food shortage on an isolated island. Naturally, it would attract the attention of countless wild beasts. But there was only one Adumbra flower, but tens of thousands of immortal cultivators had participated in the fight for it. Naturally, a bloodbath had begun because of this. Countless people had paid the price with their lives. More than half of the north had become a living hell, a furnace of flesh and blood. So much so that even after this incident had died down, the words, Adumbra flower, could still cause people's expressions to change. With Chen Shi's personality, he naturally didn't want to participate in this kind of fight. But this didn't mean that he wasn't interested in the Adumbra flower. If the ancient records were correct, this flower was a rare treasure. It had the miraculous effect of nourishing one's golden core and nourishing one's soul. If an ordinary person consumed it, they could even complete a transformation in an extremely short amount of time and condense a golden core. What kind of concept was this? A golden core. A lifespan of 500 years. If an ordinary person could directly advance to a golden core after consuming it, how powerful would its effects be if it was used as medicine, refined, and then given to immortal cultivators to consume? When he thought of this, Chen Shi suddenly felt a sense of excitement. However, this feeling was not for himself, but for Qin Ruing, who was still lying in bed. After all, as a qualified husband, he could only use the iPhone 8 that his wife had exchanged for if she had switched to the iPhone 10. The logic was that simple. Chen Shi had even made up his mind. Even if he had to turn hostile and snatch the Adumbra flower, he was going to snatch it back. Ginseng flowers nourish the body, blood thorns nourish the mind, and the Adumbra flower. Although Chen Shi's alchemy skills could not be considered top-notch, he should be able to use these 3 precious herbs to concoct a cauldron of 10 complete tonics. Ying would eat the meat and he would drink the soup. Wouldn't that be perfect? Perhaps he could even use this opportunity to heal the internal injuries in his body and rule over this world in his peak state. By then, he only needed to stand in front of the heavenly gate and see if anyone could come out of the great world. Chen Shi pondered silently. Although he really wanted to obtain this Adumbra flower, he did not let his guard down because of this. As the saying went, one who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions. The old man's motives were indeed very suspicious. Why did he have to give this Adumbra flower to him for no reason? Chen Shi could not figure it out. The Jiang clan members probably could not figure it out either. But now was not the time to delve into this question, so Chen Shi could only put this question aside for the time being and wait for the Jiang clan's final statement. Although the old man had already formed Ying, after losing his physical body, he was more like a mascot and did not have any substantial deterrence. So Chen Shi did not have much hope. Didn't he see that the group of people opposite him looked like they wanted to eat him alive? The watermelon that they had raised for a year had been stolen just like that. No one would be able to accept that, right? If a fight had to break out. For the sake of the old man, Chen Shi could be merciful and guarantee that he would not harm anyone's life. Chen Shi was prepared to fight, but the development of the situation was somewhat beyond his expectations. After hearing the old man's order to deal with them according to the clan rules, the originally restless crowd instantly quieted down. Everyone glared angrily at Chen Shi, but no one dared to stand out and question the old man's decision. From this, it could be seen how high the old man's position in the Jiang clan was. Yuan Kuei go. After the old man spoke for the third time, no matter how unwilling Jiang Yuan Kuei was, he could only sigh helplessly in the end. Then he bowed and replied, Yuan Kuei accepts the order. Old ancestor, please wait for a moment. After he finished speaking, Jiang Yuan Kuei flicked his sleeves and left with an indignant expression. He was the current clan leader of the Jiang clan and was the old ancestor's direct descendant. So, Jiang Yuan Kuei had always thought that the old ancestor was biased towards him. It was laughable that he had been constantly fighting with Jiang Zhengqing in the open and in the shadows all these years. Who would have thought that in the end, he had made a wedding dress for someone else? How could Jiang Yuan Kuei not be angry? But although he was angry, he still had to listen to the old ancestor's orders. The seal was on the stone platform on the other side of the lake. Through the clan leader's imprint, Jiang Yuan Kuei quickly opened the seal and saw the full appearance of the Adumbra flower with his own eyes. This was a plant that had never appeared on Earth before. If he really had to describe it, its appearance was somewhat like a Inga pineapple. Its leaves were like fans and its entire body was sparkling and translucent. It was as if it was made of crystal and its fine hair could be seen. As soon as the seal was opened, a refreshing fragrance wafted out with the breeze. Jiang Yuan Kuei only took a breath and felt his entire body relax, as if he had an inexhaustible energy. The flower was a strange flower, but it was as weak as a roadside rose. Jiang Yuan Kuei only used a little force and plucked this strange flower that people yearned for day and night. It was unknown if it was because the desire in his heart was too strong, but after Jiang Yuan Kuei plucked the Adumbra flower, he forgot himself and put it on the tip of his nose to sniff it. As the eldest son of the direct descendant, Jiang Fengyan naturally had to stay by Jiang Yuan Kuei's side. At this moment, he saw that Jiang Yuan Kuei was in a daze after receiving the flower, so he could not help but remind him, Father, the seal is not closed yet. Why don't I take it? Hearing this, Jiang Yuan Kuei seemed to wake up from a dream. He looked at the pavilion in the middle of the lake with a flustered expression, then said in a slightly embarrassed manner, Ahem. Go, I'll close the seal. You go and present this flower to Mr. Chen. After he finished speaking, Jiang Yuan Kuei carefully handed the Adumbra flower to Jiang Fengyan. At this moment, the father and son's expressions were like torchbearers passing the Olympic flame. They looked exceptionally serious. However, the next moment, something unexpected happened. After Jiang Fengyan received the Adumbra flower, he seemed to have gone crazy. He took off running in the opposite direction. This unexpected change stunned Jiang Yuan Kuei for a moment. By the time he came back to his senses, Jiang Fengyan had already run nearly 100 meters away. He must have used all his strength. Fengyan, what are you doing? Hurry up and get back here. Jiang Fengyan was only one step away from becoming a diviner. Running at full speed, his speed was naturally extremely fast. Seeing this, Jiang Yuan Kuei could not help but feel anxious. Just as he was about to chase after him, he heard Jiang Fengyan roar without turning his head. Father! Why should you give this flower to an outsider? The elder ancestor is unjust. I don't accept this. At this moment, Jiang Fengyan was like a child who had been wronged. After being scolded by an adult, he wanted to escape from this place as far as possible. However, among the people present, the person with the lowest cultivation was a diviner. How could he tolerate such nonsense? Jiang Fengyan had probably thought of this as well. Therefore, while he was running, he grabbed the Adumbra flower and stuffed it into his mouth. Since his father could not have it, then no one else could. He would die today. Chapter 370. People were always greedy. The so-called 5 poisonous hearts of Buddhism. Greed, anger, stupidity, hesitation, and doubt. In ancient books, it was often mentioned that lust was the leader of all evils, but this lust did not refer to sex, but to indulge and indulge without restraint, which was also greed. That is, the source of all evils. Greed was the leader of all evils. Greed, in fact, was the root of all troubles. Could it be that Jiang Fengyan really took the Adumbra flower because he refused to accept the decision of the ancestor? People often said, even if you have money, you need to be alive to spend it. But this Adumbra flower was a rare treasure that could not be bought with money. And the most important point was, this flower was easy to take, and one only needed to open their mouth and swallow the flower, and it would immediately take effect. In the face of such a strong temptation, even someone with a firm heart like Zhang Yuankui could not help but feel greedy. Let alone Jiang Fengyan, a young man who was still wet behind the ears. Therefore, Jiang Fengyan decided to gamble with his little life. As long as he cooked the rice, the ancestor should not do anything to him because he was the eldest son of the direct line of descent. No matter what, Jiang Fengyan was still a pure-blooded Jiang clansman. Even if he took the Adumbra flower, it would just flow to his family's field. It had to be said that Jiang Fengyan was indeed very bold. But he neglected the most important question, and that was, how far could he run? When he was caught, would he be able to successfully swallow this Adumbra flower? Jiang Fengyan overestimated his speed and greatly underestimated the pursuit he would face. In fact, the moment Jiang Fengyan ran away, Xianxia had already noticed something was wrong. The reason why he did not immediately take action was actually because he wanted to see if they could solve this problem on their own for the sake of the old man. After all, he was just a guest who came to visit. How could a guest go to the kitchen to serve dishes by himself? Based on this consideration, Xianxia did not stop Jiang Fengyan. However, the Jiang clan members present seemed to have been struck dumb by this sudden turn of events. After a long while, a few people came back to their senses first, and then directly set off to chase. The speed of running was naturally not as fast as the speed of flying. But Jiang Fengyan never thought of running away. He only wanted to use this opportunity to stall for time so that he could successfully swallow the entire Adumbra flower. Therefore, as soon as those people rose into the air, Jiang Fengyan had already stuffed the Adumbra flower into his mouth. Sigh! Seeing that it was too late to stop him, Xianxia could only sigh silently and prepare to do it himself. However, just as Xianxia was about to attack, the old man's voice suddenly exploded from the clouds, causing the entire Heron Island to tremble. Evil creature! How dare you! That voice was so loud that it sounded like the furious roar of a deity. Immediately afterward, a huge amount of true essence gushed out from the pavilion in the middle of the lake. The ferocity of its momentum was as if the heavens and earth were collapsing, and the mountains were collapsing and the earth was cracking. An incomparably surging Zhanyuan poured out from the pavilion in the middle of the lake. The lake water that was affected by the Zhanyuan suddenly sprayed up into the sky like a fountain. In that instant, raging waves filled the sky, and the mountains and rivers trembled. The entire Heron Island was trembling in the old man's anger. Seeing this, Zhang Yuankui was so scared that his liver and gallbladder were almost torn apart. He could only look up to the sky and shout in panic, "This child is not sensible. Ancestor, please show mercy and spare his life." Unfortunately, Zhang Yuankui's words were still too late. A water column suddenly rose from the lake and then shot toward Jiang Fengyan at an unimaginable speed. At that moment, time seemed to have stopped. Jiang Fengyan even maintained the posture of wanting to swallow the Adumbra flower as he ran. Boom! However, the huge wave arrived first. Like a flash flood, it instantly swallowed Jiang Fengyan whole. When the huge wave dissipated, the rocks, weeds, trees, and slopes where Jiang Fengyan was standing were all buried by the huge wave. As a result, the area within a few hundred meters had become a ruined scene after the flash flood. There was nothing left. Only broken trees, broken branches, and yellow soil were left on the ground. After seeing such a scene, Jiang Yuankui couldn't help but feel sad. After rushing to the place where Jiang Fengyan was before, he completely disregarded his image and used his hands to search the soil. Fengyan! Fengyan! Where are you? Father is here to save you. Where are you? Answer me! The so-called father and son were connected by heart. At this moment, it was deeply reflected. Even if Jiang Fengyan had committed a heinous crime, Jiang Yuankui couldn't bear to see him suffer any harm. But how powerful was the ancestor's power? With just one move, everything in front of him was wiped out, including Jiang Fengyan. When he thought that his son might have been killed by the ancestor himself and died without a complete corpse, Jiang Yuankui couldn't help but lie in the soil and cry bitterly. But at this moment, The old man's voice sounded again. Pass my order. Jiang Fengyan has committed a crime of disobedience. He is punished to meditate in the dry pool for 60 years. During this period, without my permission, he is not allowed to take a step out of the dry pool. The dry pool was the place where the Jiang clan punished sinners. There were all kinds of torturing formations set up in it. But the ancestor asked Jiang Fengyan to stay in there for 60 years, which was 60 years. This could already be considered the harshest punishment. But when Jiang Yuankui heard this sentence, it was as if he had heard great news. He quickly knelt on the ground and kowtowed while shouting, "Thank you, ancestor, for not killing me! Thank you, ancestor, for not killing me! Thank you, ancestor, for not killing me!" After the old man made his move, this farce finally came to an end. As for the adumbra flower that countless people yearned for day and night, under the old man's protection, it flew into Xianxia's hands, unharmed. The flower finally fell into the hands of the fated person. Thank you. After reaching out to take the adumbra flower, Xianxia turned around and looked at the pavilion in the middle of the lake with interest. The old man really hid it well. Just from this, Xianxia was enough to judge that the old man's strength at his peak was definitely not inferior to Bai Hong's. As expected of an old man who had lived for more than 1,000 years. He really did not make a move, but when he did, it was indeed shocking. Xianxia had always thought that after the old man lost his physical body, he had completely become the Jiang clan's mascot. Now it seemed that he had underestimated the heroes of the world. The old man must have mastered some secret technique that even he did not know about. That was why he could continue to cast spells without a physical body. To be honest, Xianxia was now more and more interested in this old man. He hid too many secrets, and Xianxia could not understand his motives at all. There was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. So here came the question. From the beginning, the old man had been especially attentive to him. Now, he did not hesitate to seriously injure his descendants to give him the adumbra flower. Chapter 371. 1,000-year-old Go, the reincarnation of the Chicken King. If life was a survival competition, the old man's chances of winning the chicken dinner would be far greater than anyone else's. He wasn't afraid of his opponent being tough or reckless, he was only afraid of his opponent being cunning. If he really met such a wretched opponent, no matter how strong he was, he couldn't help but mutter in his heart. After all, who knew when this old fellow would pop out and stab him in the back? Xianxia was indeed very interested in the old man's secrets. Thus, after obtaining the adumbra flower, he was prepared to return to the pavilion in the middle of the lake to have a good chat with the old man. However, he had just taken a step when the old man's voice suddenly rang out again. "Since Sir has already obtained the adumbra flower, you should be returning from a rewarding journey today. There are many matters to attend to in the clan. You've also seen the farce just now, please don't take it to heart. I'll teach them a good lesson right now. I'll definitely make sure they remember what rules are. That's all for today. It's inconvenient for me to move around, please forgive me. Yuankei, help me send the guests off." After hearing the elder master's words, Jiang Yuankui immediately stood up from the soil and wiped the mud off his face. At the same time he replied rather excitedly, "Yuankui obeys." After he finished speaking, Jiang Yuankui shook violently and used his inner yuan to shake off all the mud and dust on his body. His entire person looked like a brand new person, as if he had just taken a bath. If the elder master had asked him to send the guests off, that meant, in the elder master's heart, he, Jiang Yuankui, was still the current clan leader of the Jiang clan. The elder master didn't hold a grudge against him because of what had just happened. How could Jiang Yuankui not be excited? Thus, he immediately ran over to Xianxia eagerly. "There's no need to send the guests off." Seeing that the old man was closing the door to his guests, Xianxia could only smile and shake his head. No matter what, they were still considered allies now. Furthermore, he had received a greeting gift from the old man. Naturally, he couldn't cause any unhappiness with the old man over such a small matter. After all, they had just formed an alliance and were still in their honeymoon period. "I came in a hurry today, so I didn't bring any gifts. Instead, I received a big gift from you for no reason. I'll remember this favor for now. Once I've refined this adumbra flower into a pill, I'll bring a portion back for you. That way, your grandchildren won't blame me for stealing their good stuff." Having said that, Xianxia shifted his gaze to the direction where Jiang Fengyan was just now. That location was originally a small forest. The forest was full of fragrant grass and flowers. It was indeed a place with excellent scenery. But unfortunately, after being struck by the old man in anger, all that was left of this place was a puddle of yellow soil and mud. It looked like an abandoned construction site on a rainy day. It was a messy scene. The scenery on Heron Island was picturesque. However, this scene was like a drop of ink accidentally spilled on a painting, completely destroying the beauty of the entire painting. This happened because of me. It's a pity for this forest. I don't want to ruin the beautiful scenery of the island because of this. Fine, then let it return to its original form. As he spoke, Xianxia raised his hands and made a gesture. Immediately after, a flower formed by the condensation of vital qi slowly bloomed in his palm. After Xianxia gently waved his hand, the glowing green flower flew straight to the ruins. The Jiang clan members present were somewhat confused. They had no idea what Xianxia was doing. The only thing they could confirm was, everyone was quite dissatisfied with Xianxia's words and deeds. They only felt that he was taking advantage of the situation and saying useless words. To be honest, instead of wasting time here, he might as well get out of Daiyu Island as soon as possible. Out of sight, out of mind. Who didn't know how to say beautiful words? It was just a small forest. If it was destroyed, so be it. Did they need him to repair it? How was he going to repair it? He was just spouting nonsense. Because the elder ancestor had just flipped out, no one dared to directly express their dissatisfaction. They could only look at Xianxia with a rather strange expression. However, the next moment, something that caused everyone to be dumbstruck suddenly happened just like that. It was clearly early autumn, but Heron Island seemed to have ushered in the return of spring and the revival of all things. Green sprouts rapidly grew at a speed visible to the naked eye on the yellow soil and mud within a radius of a few hundred meters. Then, in the short span of a few breaths, these green sprouts grew into countless plants and flowers. Large trees were uprooted from the ground, and fresh flowers bloomed brilliantly. In an instant, fragrant grass covered the ground, and mountain flowers bloomed brilliantly. Although it was still a far cry from the lush greenery from before, it was no less than a miracle in everyone's eyes. Who present did not have the ability to destroy mountains and break rocks. However, it was undoubtedly a fantasy to ask them to revive all things and rejuvenate them. It was just like how humans had invented an unparalleled nuclear bomb but still had not found an effective way to cure cancer. Destruction was always easier than construction. As for them, clearly they were still far from it. After Xianxia showed off his skills, the Jiang clan members present finally understood why the elder ancestor was so friendly to this outsider. As the saying went, knowing someone by their reputation was not as good as meeting them in person. The Jiang clan members present finally had a deep understanding of the three words, Mr. Chen. Sir, you have great skills. This old man has learned something today. The old man praised from the bottom of his heart. After Xianxia heard that, he smiled and waved his hand. He replied nonchalantly, "All right, I won't say any more pleasantries. I'll visit you another day. Goodbye." As soon as she finished speaking, Xianxia suddenly disappeared under the watchful eyes of the crowd. After he left, many Jiang clan members seemed to have come back to their senses. They hurriedly looked around, trying to find his departing figure. Xianxia was also very satisfied with his performance just now. Therefore, on the way back to Shangjing, he was still recalling that feeling in his mind. Compared to when he made Qing Shan wear the red makeup, his current methods could be considered to be more skillful. In fact, it could be counted as a spell, but it could also be counted as not. Because it included the use of vital essence and Xianxia's comprehension of the laws of heaven and earth. It was definitely not as simple as casting a spell. The laws of heaven and earth were a very mysterious thing. From the reincarnation of life and death, to the rotation of the sun and moon, to the rise of clouds and rosy clouds, to the blowing of the wind on the hills. Even if it was as small as gravel or dust, it contained a certain amount of the laws of heaven and earth. Just as the eminent monks often said, every sip and every bite was predetermined. There must be a reason for the Lanine silk fruit. This made Xianxia feel a little strange. After all, he usually did not cultivate at all. When he had time, he would accompany his wife and play with his children. Why did his comprehension of the laws of heaven and earth become deeper? Could it be? This was the so-called cultivation in the secular world? Only by experiencing the secular world could one taste the various forms of life and enjoy the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Since Xianxia already had the 3 paths of heartless, unruffled, and heartless, then why couldn't he create a brand new emotional path based on his own experience? Benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trust, gentleness, respect, frugality, and tolerance. With the traditional virtues of Wuxia as the outline, he created his own path. Chapter 372. For ordinary people, National Day was still National Day, except that there was a rainstorm that didn't last long. It was sunny after the rain, and the autumn air was refreshing. It was a good time for sightseeing. With the rise of short videos, many cities in the southwest began to gradually become popular on the internet, which also diverted a lot of tourists from the old tourist cities. As the capital of a country, Xianxia had its own unique cultural heritage, so during the National Day holiday, the capital was still the first choice for people to travel in the country. The Great Wall, the Forbidden City, Tiananmen Square, Prince Gong's Mansion, Summer Palace, Ho Hai. Almost all the famous scenic spots were crowded with tourists. As far as the eye could see, there was a dense mass of people at the back of their heads. It was truly crowded and bustling with noise and excitement. As for the annoying rain just now, obviously, it was completely forgotten by everyone. However, it was because of the heavy rain just now that Xianxia finally ushered in a good day with clear skies and clear winds. The sky was blue and the clouds were white. There was no trace of fog, and the sky was blue like the satin produced by the Jianghu weaving department. It looked particularly smooth and soft, and people couldn't help but want to reach out and touch it. If you add in the fresh and pleasant air, even the tourists who were complaining about the rain just now couldn't wait for another heavy rain like this tomorrow, so that they could enjoy the most complete classical beauty of Xianxia. All the scenic spots were lively, but the most unique old alley of Xianxia was still so quiet. Tourists in 2s and 3s stood in the alley taking photos. When they saw Xianxia directly open the door of the courtyard, they couldn't help but show a trace of envy in their eyes. The courtyard of Xianxia. It was very valuable. When Xianxia crossed the Chuehua gate with big and small bags, Qin Ruing had already woken up. Qin Xueqing accompanied her in the room and talked. Because Gu Lao hadn't seen Xianxia for a long time, he called Xiao Yuan to the kitchen to prepare dinner. The 3 little guys' activity level was seriously over the limit, so when Xianxia entered the door, he saw the 3 of them lying on the sofa watching cartoons attentively. This was their family's National Day. It was an ordinary National Day. The sister-in-law seemed to want to know what Xianxia was doing just now, so she couldn't help but ask a few times. However, she was fooled by Xianxia. Going to Daiyu Island was an official matter, but going home was a private matter. Public affairs and private affairs should not be mixed together. Xianxia had always been very clear about this. After the backbone returned, the Sihiyuan quickly became lively again, as if nothing had happened. Gu Lao was in charge of cooking, and Xianxia and Xiao Yuan were his assistants. Soon, a large table of delicacies was served. At this time, the shortcomings of the north had to be mentioned, and that was, the temperature difference between day and night was huge, and the sun set quickly. Just after 6 o'clock, the sky gradually darkened. When it was time to light the lanterns, the heavy rain had just stopped. Raindrops that had not yet dried up slowly rolled down from the leaves. Birds were looking out from under the eaves. The wind was cool, bringing with it the fragrance of the earth that came from nowhere. The little fellow looked up and saw a few stars blinking in the sky. "This song is so nice. Papa taught me. I learned it right away. It's very easy. Come, I'll teach you. Sing with me." The dark sky hangs low and the bright stars follow. Insects fly. Insects fly. Who are you thinking of? In the brightly lit central room, the little fellow did not have stage fright in front of the big family. Instead, she clapped her hands and sang "Insects Fly" with her sweet voice. Although the brothers were a little embarrassed, they still plucked up the courage to sing with the little fellow under everyone's constant encouragement. The beautiful child's voice kept ringing in the room. For a moment, the big courtyard was a little more warm because of this. The 7-day holiday passed quickly. Xianxia also did as the little girl wished. In these few days, she took the 2 brothers to accompany her in Xianxia City to play to their heart's content. However, playing was one thing. When the holiday was over, she had to go to school. For this reason, the father and daughter held pinky hooks. Probably because she was in a good mood at that time, Nian also patted her chest and promised that she would go to kindergarten when school started. But, when it was the day of school, the little fellow stayed in bed and did not want to get up. Xianxia had no choice but to carry her to kindergarten. For this reason, Nian lost her temper. If she had not heard that the brothers had already gone to kindergarten, she would have been rolling on the ground. Then again, even adults had holiday syndrome, let alone a child who was only the size of a bean. Therefore, she could understand Nian's feelings. However, considering that the child was growing up day by day, preschool education was really important. Therefore, she could only bear the pain and play the role of a strict father for once. After all, this time, he could not give up halfway like before, right? When the father and daughter arrived at the school, there were already many parents sitting in the classroom with their children. In fact, compared with other children, Nian's performance was already very good. At least she did not cry, right? When she found the two brothers in the classroom, the performance of the three little fellows was even more outstanding. Other children were crying, but the three of them were happily playing with the small toys prepared by the teacher. The teacher used the performance of the three of them to encourage other children. After the little fellow heard this, her little face was so happy that flowers were about to bloom. Therefore, before Xianxia spoke, the little fellow took the initiative to say to Xianxia, "It's time for class. Papa, go back. I'm not afraid." Looking at her proud little face, it seemed that she had completely forgotten how she was lying in bed in the morning. "Okay, you three be good and listen to the teacher. Papa will pick you up later. Goodbye, Papa." Looking at Nian's cute little face, Xianxia's heart melted. Therefore, like many other parents, he stood in the corridor and secretly watched for a long time before he reluctantly left. Nian started school, and Xianxia finally had some free time. In fact, during this period of time, he had been thinking about how to combine the prescription in order to maximize the medicinal effects of the adumbra flower. After all, he had too few resources at his disposal and could only supplement it with ordinary herbs. Xianxia pondered over the prescription as he walked out of the school gate. However, at this moment, an A6 suddenly stopped in front of him. Then, a man rolled down the window and smiled at him. "Mr. Chen, can I give you a ride? Today is October 21st, it's my birthday." Birthday wish. Finish the book properly, don't end it badly. This is also the first time I've written a book to 800,000 words. I've completely turned from a semi-newcomer to a veteran author. I've also experienced a lot of ups and downs. I'm only half a step away from becoming a god, so my mentality has changed a lot compared to a year ago. This book has already reached 50,000 high subscriptions when it was 700,000 words. It's really 50,000. There's absolutely no exaggeration. Unfortunately, I collapsed. I've indeed never written so many words before, so I'm getting weaker and weaker towards the end. Practicing with 10,000 subscriptions, thinking slowly, writing slowly, learning slowly. I don't think there are many people in Yuewen who have tried this. Therefore, I definitely won't stop writing because I still need to improve. Well, I won't say any more nonsense. Actually, I just want to sincerely thank everyone for their continuous support on my birthday. Every comment, every recommendation ticket, every monthly ticket, every gift. I've seen it all and remembered it in my heart. Chapter 373. Mr. Chen, can I give you a ride? The man in front of him was Wang Junqing, who sat at the same table as Xianxia on the day Nian entered the school. Perhaps it was because of his age, but Wang Junqing always gave off a mature and steady vibe. It was what people often referred to as manliness. When this kind of man smiled, even as a man, he could not help but be captivated by his charm and seriously think about every word he said. This was the charm of a mature man and had nothing to do with gender. If an analogy was to be made, a mature man was like a bottle of aged wine. The moment the bottle was opened, the fragrance was enough to attract everyone's attention. Obviously, Wang Junqing wanted to use this opportunity to talk to Xianxia. But unfortunately, after Xianxia heard him, he waved his hand and smiled. "No need, my house is nearby. It's faster to take the small road back." After that, Xianxia did not even give Wang Junqing a chance to speak again. He turned around and walked along the sidewalk. Brother Wang, who is this guy? Since he's so shameless, why don't I just go and have a chat with him? Zhao Ziyu was sitting in the driver's seat. After seeing Chen Shi leave, he suddenly felt like he was insulted. He almost got out of the car to teach Chen Shi a lesson. Talk. How? Kidnap him and talk? Wang Junqing coldly interrupted him. Hearing this, Zhao Ziyu suddenly became like a frosted eggplant and completely withered. It was not difficult to see that the two of them were not ordinary friends. Instead, it was more like a superior and subordinate relationship. Didn't you always say that you have eyes and ears in Beijing? It's been more than a month. How come there is no reliable news at all? Didn't we already investigate to Zhonghai? We even found the household register for you. If you ask me, this guy is just a bumpkin. Brother Wang, why do you care so much about him? How can a bumpkin get a kid into this school? Wang Junqing casually asked a rhetorical question and directly made Zhao Ziyu speechless. Actually, thinking about it, it made sense. Even though it was just a small kindergarten, the water inside was deep. From the first day the children stepped into this kindergarten, regardless of their future academic performance, they would definitely follow the pre-planned path all the way forward. They would go through childhood, primary, junior, high, and finally plunge into the top schools in the country, such as Qing, Bei, Ran, Law, and so on. The only possible fork in the road was the choice between politics and business. Those in business could choose to study abroad, while those in politics had to stay in the country to further their studies. This was indeed the case. While the bumpkins were still warming up at the starting line, others were already drinking champagne and celebrating at the finish line. However, this was not to say that society was unfair. After all, ever since the fall of the Qing dynasty, whose ancestors were not farmers, other people had to go through at least 3 generations of accumulation before their children and grandchildren could enjoy the wealth they had today. Alright, let's leave it at that. I just thought that this person wasn't simple, so I wanted to make friends with him. Since she's unwilling, let's put this matter aside for now. Anyway, the child is still young. Let's see how it goes in the future. The car with the Beijing A license plate slowly drove away. At this time, Chen Shi, who had already walked more than 100 meters away, suddenly turned her head to look at the car. Her face revealed a thoughtful expression. Time passed day by day. It was so peaceful that there was not a trace of ripple. In the blink of an eye, another month passed. Today was November 1st. It was Halloween abroad and Little Singles Day in China. The autumn air was refreshing, and the smell of osmanthus was wafting in the air. It was a good time to play. And from National Day until now, the only good news during this period was Gu Yao's soul had finally stabilized and could move freely without the soul crystal. Although the soul could not speak, it could convey the emotions in her heart through the soul. Therefore, the moment Chen Shi released her, he sensed the true feelings in Gu Yao's heart. She was very happy. Happy from the bottom of her heart. At this time, Gu Yao finally regained a little bit of her humanity. Although her IQ was still slightly lower than that of ordinary people, at least she was no longer a ferocious ghost who lacked brains. In addition to this matter, something else happened that made Chen Shi quite depressed. That was, Nian Nian no longer called him Papa in a coquettish voice. Thinking about this, Chen Shi's heart immediately gave birth to 10,000 depression. That was because he always felt that the coquettish Papa sounded very intimate, but the clear Dad sounded more distant. Here, he had to mention the little guy's growth experience. Because Aunt Zhang was from Sichuan, the little guy grew up with her, and inevitably there was a little Sichuan flavor in his accent. The teachers in the kindergarten were all from Shangjing, so their pronunciation was naturally the most standard Mandarin pronunciation. For the teachers, a child's inaccurate pronunciation was a big problem. Therefore, when they were in school, they would always patiently correct the little guy's pronunciation. As time went by, of course, Papa was gone, and then only Dad was left. In this regard, Chen Shi simply had to suffer in silence. There was a feeling of unspeakable bitterness. Bitter. Really bitter. Fortunately, other than this bitter matter, there was nothing else to worry about during this period. Although Qin Ruang's cultivation progress was still very slow, Chen Shi was not anxious because of this. This was because he believed that as long as the Adumbra flower was refined into a pill, Yingying would definitely be able to use it to step into the diviner stage. However, how precious was the Adumbra flower? In the absence of other materials, even he did not dare to act rashly. Therefore, after nearly a month of thinking, Xianxia finally came up with a more feasible prescription and prepared to officially start refining the pill. However, at this moment, the spirit energy tide appeared again. In the blink of an eye, black clouds rolled and covered half the sky. After a few thunderous rumbles, the heavy rain began to fall. Xianxia walked out of the room and frowned. After observing for a while, he realized that the tide this time was not very turbulent. The center was also rather far from Shangjing. Seeing this, Xianxia looked as if he had seen something happy. After shaking his head with a smile, he turned around and went back into the room. He was prepared to stay by Qin Ruoying's side and study her symptoms. The reason why Xianxia did not immediately move to contain the tide was because he had reached an agreement with the old man. Therefore, the moment the spirit energy tide appeared, the entire Diyu Island was in an uproar. In just a moment, hundreds of diviners suddenly flew out of the island like birds, flying in flocks toward the center of the tide. It was as if hundreds of birds were flying through the sky. It was so majestic that it was a rare sight. Chapter 374. The celestial beings were out hunting, patrolling the heavens. Ever since Emperor Qin burned the books and buried the scholars, such a grand event had not happened in the Divine Land for a long time. Diyu Island's magical formation was activated. Over 300 celestial beings rushed valiantly toward the center of the tide, facing the rolling black clouds, flashing lightning, and rolling thunder. This moment was destined to be recorded in the annals of the Jiang clan. Because from this day on, the Jiang clan was no longer a clan of sinners abandoned by the divine ancestor. Under the leadership of the old ancestor, they would compose an epic that belonged to the Jiang clan in this divine great land that was once again filled with vitality. In fact, after the great ancestor made this decision, everyone knew what they were going to face. But at the same time, they also understood one thing, and that was, the strong often rose from humble beginnings. In front of the great world, the overall strength of Diyu Island was as insignificant as an ant. It could be said that any divine general from the Heavenly Gate had the ability to massacre the entire Diyu Island. After all, 300 celestial beings sounded like a lot, but they were only 300 pseudo-core immortal cultivators. They had not even truly condensed their Jindan. Of course, if these 300 celestial beings formed a formation and attacked and retreated together, even a divine general would not dare to face them head-on. However, this was only a theoretical concept. Because a divine general was not a wooden dummy. He only needed to employ guerrilla tactics. Through constant harassment, sneak attacks and ambushes, how long would it take for him to kill 300 celestial beings? The gap between the two realms was simply too big. 1 against 100, 1 against 1,000. This was what an immortal cultivator should be capable of. If it had been in the past, the Jiang clan would definitely not have the delusion of going against the great world. They were just a lowly clan of sinners. When the spiritual energy was exhausted, they were like sand lizards wandering in the desert. They could only rely on eating maggots and rotten meat to sustain their lives. But suddenly times had changed. With the continuous recovery of spiritual energy, the desert gradually became an oasis. Looking at the jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards swarming toward the oasis, the sand lizards hesitated. Should they continue to live lowly, or should they stand up straight and fight the jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards to protect the oasis that originally belonged to them? If he took a gamble, he might end up enraging the ferocious beast, and in the end, he would end up without a corpse. Then, he could continue to hide in the soil for the rest of his life, eating maggots and rotting meat. Thank goodness. The Jiang clan still retained the last trace of bravery. So, even if they had to take the risk of their entire clan being annihilated, the Jiang clan still had to fight for that beautiful future under the lead of the old ancestor. Perhaps even the old ancestor didn't realize. Their present conduct is a perfect reflection of the famous saying, natural selection, survival of the fittest. Compete with the heavens, compete with the earth, and compete with people. Competition was the unchanging truth in the hearts of the immortal cultivators. To Xianxia, defeating the spirit Qi tide was just a small matter with a casual swing of his sword. But to the Jiang clan, this was a huge matter that could only be barely accomplished if they went all out. The center of the tide was not far from Diyu Island. Under Jiang Yuankui's guidance, the Jiang clan's celestials soon arrived at their destination. On a vast and boundless ocean. Because they moved quickly, they were fortunate enough to witness the occurrence of the heavenly anomaly. They saw a waterspout suddenly rising from the surface of the ocean. In just a short moment, the waterspout had already risen to the clouds and was tightly connected with the thunderclouds in the sky. From afar, the waterspout was like a pillar supporting the heavens and the earth by itself. Everyone was stunned. After all, this was the first time they witnessed a heavenly anomaly with their own eyes. In front of such a huge natural phenomenon, the 300+ people were simply as insignificant as a speck of dust. Boom! Boom! Coupled with the deafening sound of thunder in the sky from time to time, many people started to have thoughts of retreating. The old ancestor wanted them to go against the heavens. Faced with such a violent natural phenomenon, not to mention the others, even the leader, Jianghu, couldn't help but frown. However, just as everyone was hesitating, a figure suddenly plunged into the waterspout in front of him, and then laughed out loud. A bunch of trash. A mere waterspout scared you all? Didn't you guys always want to know how I broke through? Then you all better watch carefully. The person who spoke was Jiang Zhengqing, who had been beaten into the ground by Xianxia a few days ago. After this period of recuperation, Jiang Zhengqing's injuries had finally healed by 70 to 80%. He didn't expect that as soon as he appeared today, his wild and unruly nature would once again appear. Actually, among all the people present, Jiang Zhengqing's talent wasn't the most outstanding, but he was the first Jiang clan member to step into the heavenly man realm. Therefore, everyone had always been curious as to how he had comprehended the key to it. However, curiosity was just curiosity. Due to Jiang Zhengqing's annoying personality, no one had specifically asked him for advice. Who would have thought that he would actually take the initiative to say it today? In fact, how could Jiang Zhengqing be talented? He must have a screw loose in his head. When a normal person saw such a shocking heavenly anomaly, their first reaction would definitely be to avoid it. However, Jiang Zhengqing insisted on doing the opposite. No matter what kind of heavenly anomaly it was, he wanted to use this opportunity to train himself. His breakthrough stemmed from the spiritual energy tide that had appeared last time. It was just like how Yang used the black iron heavy sword to practice swordsmanship under the waterfall, increasing his strength through resisting the waterfall. When the spiritual energy tide appeared last time, Jiang Zhengqing just happened to be cultivating nearby. He felt that the spiritual energy in the center of the whirlpool was especially turbulent, so he dived in without thinking and stepped into the heavenly man realm in one go. There was definitely danger. After all, the spiritual energy in the center of the whirlpool was far superior to the outside world. If one's cultivation was insufficient or had an unstable foundation, they might suffer from chi deviation if they weren't careful. They might even explode and die because they couldn't withstand the enormous spiritual energy. However, for a cultivator like Jiang Zhengqing who had been trapped in the heavenly man realm for many years due to the exhaustion of spiritual energy, how could this be dangerous? This was simply a great opportunity. Because his foundation had been tempered thousands of times, as long as there was enough spiritual energy of heaven and earth, he could condense a true golden core. In the past, the heavenly gate would always open with the spiritual energy tide. Everyone wanted to ascend to the great world through the heavenly gate, so they didn't realize at all. Even if they didn't pass through the heavenly gate, they could use this opportunity to break through to the heavenly man realm. Therefore, with Jiang Zhengqing as an example, everyone carefully flew into the center of the whirlpool. If the spiritual energy tide was compared to a cake, then Xianxia used brute force to smash the cake into mud with one slap. Chapter 375. Under Jiang Zhengqing's lead, the Jiang clan celestials plunged into the world-shaking waterspout. After that, the 300+ celestials began to resist the power of the whirlpool while crazily absorbing the spiritual energy within it. Their bodies were like the earth in the desert. Due to the lack of water, they had already cracked and collapsed. After the heaven and earth spirit chi surged like a flood, their bodies seemed to have turned from cracked earth into fertile fields. The rain nourished the earth, causing the long dried-up desert to once again grow green sprouts. Everyone experienced a feeling that they had never felt before from this. Carefree. It was truly carefree. The rich and pure spiritual chi of heaven and earth was like a bottle of iced cola. The instant they drank it, they could clearly feel An incomparably cool feeling continuously entered their throat, then passed through their internal organs, the major acupoints all over their body, and finally reached their limbs, bones, and the ends of their bodies. But regrettably, the tide of spiritual energy was not very strong to begin with. Thus, after the 300+ celestials crazily devoured it like maggots, the waterspout shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. About half an hour later, the originally incomparably thick waterspout turned into a thin line of water. Then, it suddenly stopped rotating. Like a water ball that had been punctured, it collapsed in midair with a loud bang. Seawater continued to sprinkle down from the sky. The spiritual energy that had lost its restraints surged in all directions. Waves came one after another. In just a short while, everything had returned to normal. Just like that. It's over? Jianghu sat cross-legged in midair. Even after the stormy waves had completely calmed down, he still had a feeling of endless aftertaste. One could not blame him for losing his composure. After all, this feeling was truly too refreshing. Too many people came today. There's not enough to share. All right, that's it then. Go back and properly enter seclusion for a while. Carefully savor the subtleties of this. You should be able to break through to Celestial very soon. Seeing that everyone seemed to want to continue, Jianghu, who had experienced it before, couldn't help but laugh proudly. After laughing for a while, Jianghu suddenly realized a problem. Perhaps the old ancestor had already anticipated the crux of the matter. That was why he made such a big show of making an enemy out of Tiandu? The tidal wave had already receded. The Jiang clan's heavenly clansmen stood up and prepared to return to Daiyu Island. Everyone seemed to be too preoccupied with the feeling just now, so even Jianghu didn't notice it. Not long after they left, a figure suddenly rose from the sea. This was a young man in his early 20s. He was wearing an extremely retro white robe, and his hair was tied up in a bun. Coupled with the aloof temperament that he inadvertently exuded, this young man simply looked like a talented scholar who had walked out of an ancient painting. But the slightly strange thing was, this person clearly came out of the sea, but there was not a single drop of water on his body. Furthermore, he didn't even make any movements of stepping on the water. His body just floated straight up to the surface of the sea. When more than half of his body was out of the water, the young man walked out of the water step by step as if he was climbing a flight of stairs. Then, he stood 2 to 3 meters above the water. Master, oh master, could it be that you've even calculated this step? That's why you let me stay in the lower realm alone? But if you leave, your disciple will feel terrible. Yuan Tianzuan is really something. It wasn't easy for me to find a voice transmission talisman in the Misty Pavilion. As soon as I opened it, I didn't even have time to tell you that I'm safe. He ordered me to teach that person a lesson. He even said that it was for the sake of Tiandu's reputation. That's easy for him to say. Even senior brother Baihong wasn't a match for that person. How would I dare to provoke him? All right, I know even if you don't say it. I can't go against the orders of the Heavenly Venerable. On this vast and boundless sea, apart from the constantly rising waves, there was probably only blue sky and white clouds left. It was obviously so lonely that even a bird could not be seen. But this young man was still looking up, as if he was talking to someone. Although you can't hear it. But I still want to say. Yuan Tianzuan, oh Yuan Tianzuan. Wuxia's abilities are weak. I really can't provoke that person, so I can only trouble you to come down and deal with him personally. As he spoke, the young man looked in the direction that Jianghu and the rest left. Then, as if taking a stroll in the park, he slowly walked in that direction. There's an old saying. Pick the soft persimmons to pinch. Apart from waving flags and shouting battle cries, I seem to be able to help you get rid of these eyesores? Forget it, no matter how small a mosquito is, it's still meat. So that you won't find another reason to say that I'm disobedient and disrespectful. The young man's speed seemed slow, but in fact, it was extremely fast. Even though Jianghu and the rest flew at full speed, they never left the young man's line of sight. And the scariest thing was, Jianghu and the rest were tailed, but among the 300 people, not a single one noticed this mysterious young man. They soon arrived at Daiyu Island. After Jianghu and the rest entered the formation, they disappeared into thin air. At this moment, the young man looked at the vast ocean in front of him and couldn't help but mumble. Is this the Big Dipper formation passed down from ancient times? No wonder I couldn't find the right place. As he spoke, the young man walked to the edge of the formation. Without seeing him do anything, a golden light screen appeared out of thin air. The young man stood outside the light screen and stretched his neck to look inside. Then, he walked in with a smile on his face. Then, Diyu Island, which was like a paradise, was completely revealed in front of him. The young man had just arrived, so he couldn't find his way. He couldn't tell which island was the main one. Therefore, he went to the nearest island and strolled along the beach. After walking for a while, a group of children playing on the beach noticed him. The leader was a 17 or 18-year-old boy. The boy was quite alert. When he saw the young man's strange clothes, he frowned and called out to him. Stop! Who are you? Hearing that, the young man immediately stopped in his tracks. He first looked at the group of children in front of him, then smiled and replied, Me? I'm Wuxia. You wouldn't know me even if I told you, so I think I might as well not tell you. You're an outsider. The boy looked at him in shock. Not long ago, there was a muddled incident where an outsider suddenly climbed Xianxia Peak. Therefore, Diyu Island was under martial law recently. Therefore, when the boy came back to his senses, he immediately turned to his companion and said, Little Six, go to the guard hall and tell them we found an outsider. Tell them to. The boy didn't finish his sentence. Because the young man suddenly attacked. He just waved his sleeve casually, and a huge force sent more than 10 children flying. After flying for more than 10 meters, the children fell heavily into the sea. No one knew if they were dead or alive. Note. Chapter 376. Even though he was facing a group of half-grown children, the man who called himself Wuxia still attacked them. He did not seem to think that there was anything wrong with what he did. After sending the children flying into the sea, he even looked at the sea with disdain and muttered, How rude! After that, he continued walking toward the depths of the island without looking back. As he went deeper into the island, he encountered more and more Jiang clan members along the way. However, regardless of whether they were male or female, old or young, Wuxia would raise his sleeve and send them flying with a slap. The only thing worth rejoicing about was, judging from the state of these people after they fell, Wuxia did not seem to have killed them. He only knocked them out. He did not walk very fast, but he walked straight toward the depths of the island. Therefore, he soon arrived at the square in the center of the island. This island was only one of the 17 sub-islands of Diyu Island. The people on this island were also from the branch clan. Finally, after Wuxia failed to knock everyone out with a slap, his actions had completely alarmed the entire Diyu Island. The sudden sound of the enemy attack bell was like a muffled thunder that exploded in the sky above Diyu Island. Bam! 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 Jiang Zhangqing and the others had just returned to Xianxia Peak. At this moment, they were gathered together to discuss their experiences. After hearing the sound of the bell, one of the heavenly beings immediately stood up and said with a frown, The forbidden bell of Xiaoshan Island has rung. I'll go back and take a look first. After saying that, the ancestor of the branch clan, Jiang Dihao, rushed out of the ancestral hall and flew towards Xiaoshan Island. After he left, Jiang Yuankue looked at the others with a puzzled expression and asked, Mr. Chen has already reached an agreement with the ancestor. I don't think he'll be an enemy of the Jiang clan anymore. But other than him, who else in the world would dare to cause trouble on Diyu Island now? Jiang Yuankue slowly scanned the entire place. However, everyone seemed to still be reminiscing about the spirit tide just now. Therefore, many of them even had faint smiles on their faces. However, they could not be blamed for being arrogant. After all, this was the most powerful time in the past 1,000 years for the Jiang clan. More than 300 celestials. The last time Chen Shi came to cause trouble, everyone was still in seclusion on Heron Island. So even Chen Shi had not truly seen the Jiang clan's foundation. Now that everyone had just returned from the spirit chi tide, all the celestials were gathered at serene Afterglow Peak, but there were still some ignorant fellows who dared to jump out and cause trouble. Isn't this the same as hanging an old man? Is he tired of living? Therefore, when Jiang Dihao got up and went to Xiaoshan Island, the others completely forgot about this matter and continued to talk about the topic of cultivation in twos and threes. Because in everyone's mind, Jianghu alone was enough to suppress all the unbridled troublemakers. Shoshan Island was only a few kilometers away from the main island. Jianghu soon arrived above Shoshan Island and saw the troublemaker. But that person didn't have any intention of hiding at all. He just stood in the middle of the square and slightly raised his head to look at him. Seeing this, Jianghu immediately flew into a rage and scolded sternly, "Which child dares to cause trouble on my Daiyu Island? Why aren't you surrendering now? Perhaps this old man can still spare your life." After saying that, Jianghu flew directly toward that person, ready to take him down and slowly interrogate him. At this time, Wuxia, who had been standing in the middle of the square in a daze, finally seemed to have seen something interesting. He couldn't help but mutter to himself, "I've been holding back for so long, and now I can finally move my muscles and bones." While muttering, Wuxia raised his right hand. Then, a small yellow flag suddenly appeared in his hand. If one ignored the workmanship of the flag and the exquisite and complicated patterns on the flag, he really looked like a member of an elderly tour group, which was simply too low. Jianghu didn't know why Wuxia suddenly had a small flag in his hand, and he only thought that this young man was playing a trick. That was because he didn't know that there was actually a magic treasure in this world, called Sumeru mustard bag. Born like a mustard seed, there's a Sumeru, and the heart like a speck of dust, there's a big world inside. The Sumeru mustard bag, also known as the interspatial storage bag, was a magic treasure that could only be refined by cultivators at the Dongshu stage. This magic treasure involved the profound meaning of the word void. It seemed to be only the size of a palm, but in reality, it could contain objects ranging from a few cubic meters to dozens of cubic meters. It was really a magical treasure that was necessary for traveling, killing, and arson. Xianxia used to have one, but unfortunately, he accidentally lost it on his way back. If Xianxia was here right now, and saw the treasure in this person's hands with her own eyes, even if he was as powerful as he was, he would no longer underestimate his opponent. Instead, he would use 120% of his strength to fight the next battle. This was a very simple principle. One could roughly judge a person's worth from the way they traveled, and it was the same for cultivators. Only cultivators at the Dongshu stage could refine the Sumeru mustard bag, and the materials needed were very rare. Naturally, it couldn't be something that could be found on the streets. Bai Hong didn't have it, and neither did Shui Xiang. However, this young man named Wuxia had it. This also meant that, no matter what his cultivation was, his status in the outside world was higher than Bai Hong's. Xianxia understood this principle, but Jianghu didn't. Therefore, the moment he rushed towards Wuxia, Wuxia also waved the small yellow flag in his hand. At that moment, Jianghu didn't sense any fluctuation of spiritual energy, so he was even a little curious about what this young man was doing. However, the next second, the whole ground cracked open. The floor of the square collapsed and shattered, and hundreds of earth spikes suddenly protruded from the ground. From afar, it looked like a hedgehog, and all the spikes on its body were aimed at Jianghu in the air. Jianghu didn't have time to react at all, and these hundreds of earth spikes all shot towards him. The speed of the earth spikes was very strange. Once they shot out, they covered the sky above the square. No! After a wail, Jianghu's figure completely disappeared. The earth spikes turned into dust and leisurely sprinkled down, mixed with a particularly dazzling rain of blood. After the smoke and dust dispersed, this terrifying young man held the small flag, and then laughed and said to the Zhang clansmen who rang the forbidden bell, "Ring it again, remember to ring it a little louder, or else I'm afraid they won't hear it." From beginning to end, his body didn't move at all. He just lightly waved the small flag in his hand, and with the power of the small flag, he instantly obliterated a celestial being. It was obvious that this small flag was also a magic treasure. But it was different from Bai Hong's flowing cloud sword and Shui Xiang's blue wave silk gauze. The small flag in Wuxia's hand had once appeared in the legends of Wuxia, and it had a well-known name, namely Chapter 377. The Central Wuji Apricot Flag. If one added the Eastern Green Lotus Flag, the Southern Floating Flame Flag, the Western White Cloud Boundary Flag, and the Northern Jianghu Eagle Flag, these 5 flags formed a set of killing weapons that had once appeared in the myths and legends of Wuxia, the Khanate 5-element flags. Ever since Chen Shi learned about the deeds of the ancient cultivators from the old man, He had a basic understanding of these myths and legends, and that was, these myths and legends were more or less based on evidence, so the reputation had been passed down from ancient times until now. Of course, the real Khanate five-element flags was definitely not as exaggerated as the myths and legends described, but it was definitely considered an extremely powerful set of Dharma treasures. In addition, the Khanate five-element flags was truly praiseworthy not because of its quality, but because it was a set. Because it was a set of Dharma treasures, not one. The Wuji apricot flag was only one of them. It could be freely disassembled and combined. This was the advantage of a set of Dharma treasures, but at the same time, it was also an unavoidable disadvantage of a set of Dharma treasures. Based on Xianxia's experience, after gathering all 5 flags, the Khanate five-element flags could at least reach the quality of a supreme treasure, which was the same level as his heaven derivation sword. But because it was not pure enough, the Khanate five-element flags could never be compared to the heaven derivation sword. But then again, a supreme treasure was still a supreme treasure. Even if the 5 flags were disassembled, just the central Wuji apricot flag alone should be able to reach the level of a high-grade spirit treasure. What was a spirit treasure? Above a Dharma treasure was a spirit treasure. When Xianxia had just returned, he had used 3 inferior Guanyin statues to refine 3 defensive Dharma treasures. But in a real sense, these 3 Guanyin pendants did not reach the standard of a Dharma treasure at all. At best, they could only be considered the lowest level of inferior Dharma artifacts. After all, at that time, Xianxia had no cultivation and no materials, so the Guanyin pendants that he forcibly refined would naturally not be good treasures. Dharma artifacts, Dharma treasures, spirit treasures, supreme treasures, and extremely rare Khanate supreme treasures. According to their quality, they could be divided into 9 grades. Grade 1 was the lowest, and Grade 9 was the highest. The reason why he didn't mention magic treasures before was because it was impossible to find the materials to refine magical weapons on Earth. Refining magical weapons was an extremely difficult task, not to mention magical weapons with many wonderful uses. Bai Hong's sword, Qing Wan's spear, and Shui Xiang's damask could all be considered as high-quality magic treasures. Bai Hong's sword was quite handy, so Xianxia did not destroy it. Therefore, he chose to smelt Qing Wan's spear and used the smelted materials to refine a set of defensive magic equipment. In addition to Nianyan's bracelet necklace, Xianxia later gave Lin Xian a self-defense pendant. Of course, heavenly materials and earthly treasures were all unique. Therefore, after smelting the magic treasure and then using the raw materials to refine a new magic treasure, if new materials were not added during this period, then the quality of the new magic treasure would plummet after it was formed. For example, Qing Wan's spear was originally grade 8, but after being smelted by Xianxia, the new necklace could only barely reach grade 5. And this was a manifestation of Xianxia's considerable knowledge in refining weapons. Magic treasures were like weapons in the hands of ordinary people. The better the weapon, the stronger the combat power. Even if a child picked up an AK, he could easily kill a group of unarmed adults. It was precisely because of this. From the moment Wuxia took out the central Wuji apricot yellow flag, Daiyu Island was destined to be set off a bloody storm. Dong dong dong, dong! The rapid and loud forbidden bell rang through the sky again. This time, all the Jiang clan's people sitting in the ancestral hall were stunned. Jiang Dihao could not even handle such a small matter? Just now, the bell had only rung 9 times, which meant that someone had invaded and reinforcements were needed. But now, the bell rang like a storm, and it had rung a total of 36 times. This meant that the situation had deteriorated to the point where it was out of control, and the entire clan urgently needed to face it together. Let's go and take a look. This time, before Jiang Yuankue could say anything, Jiang Zhengqing could not sit still anymore. After all, no matter what, he was still a member of the Jiang clan. No matter how much a family quarreled, behind closed doors, they were still a family. Now that the Jiang clan was being trampled on, how could Jiang Zhengqing sit still and do nothing? After Jiang Zhengqing rushed out of the ancestral hall, the rest of the people reacted and quickly followed behind him, flying straight toward Xiaoshan Island. The Celestials were on patrol, hunting everywhere. Many of the Jiang clan's juniors were more or less trembling when they heard the forbidden bell ringing one after another. They were afraid that the enemy would suddenly appear in front of them. Thus, when they saw hundreds of their ancestors flying over the island, they immediately stood on the ground and cheered crazily as if they had been injected with chicken blood. This scene deeply demonstrated the meaning of the military parade. A clan or even a country would only feel excited and proud when they displayed their strength in front of the people. The dignity of Diyu Island. It would not allow anyone to trample on it. Chapter 378. It was hard to describe what it was like. It was just a pile of soil mixed with sand and stones, but it was like a living creature that could move freely and pounce on its prey. Jianghu was obviously playing the role of the prey. The mud pillars emerged from the ground and shot into the sky like poisonous snakes pouncing on their prey. They were incredibly fast. The strength of the mud pillars surprised Jianghu. While he was in a daze, the mud pillars had already reached him. After Jianghu reacted, he immediately retreated into the sky. But the scary thing was, the speed at which the two mud pillars rose was even faster than his flying speed. In a flash, the mud pillars had caught up with Jianghu. After all, this was already the second time he had been chased to the point of fleeing in such a sorry state. Jianghu could not help but feel angry when he thought of all the things that had happened to him after his breakthrough. He was a heavenly being after all. It was fine when he faced Mr. Chen's flying immortal sword. But now, he was being chased all over the sky by two mud pillars. Did they really think that he was a heavenly being and a paper tiger? Jianghu decided not to dodge anymore. He was ready to take the attack head-on. In an instant, Jianghu was like a god descending to earth. The golden light around him shone brightly, almost illuminating half of Xiangshan Island. 6 trigram calming mind. Concealment of spirit and qi. The moment the protective shield appeared, 2 mud pillars, one on the left and one on the right, smashed into Jianghu's body. Bang! A loud noise reverberated in the sky above Diyu Island. The surging true core dispersed in all directions due to the violent collision, causing a strong gust of wind to blow across Xiangshan Island. Wuxia stood calmly on the ground and looked up at the situation from afar. He could not help but smile faintly. They were too weak. He did not even need to do anything. The power of the Wuji apricot yellow flag alone was enough to massacre the entire Diyu Island. Wuxia thought about whether he should speed up as he turned to look at the heavenly beings of the Jiang clan. But just as he was about to wave the apricot yellow flag again, Jianghu's slightly hurried roar suddenly rang out. This kid's Dharma treasure is too powerful. Retreat! 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 It wasn't difficult to discern that his voice clearly carried a trace of shock and terror. Obviously, he was terrified by the might of the Wuji apricot yellow flag. Jianghu had quite a bit of prestige in the clan. After hearing his incessantly trembling shout, the Jiang clan celestials naturally did not dare to rashly advance. They could only hurriedly retreat several miles. At this time, Jianghu turned into a stream of light and flew out of the square, rushing back to the crowd. If it wasn't for the ancestor bestowing me with a protective magic treasure a few days ago, I'm afraid I would have been dead by now. After Jianghu safely returned to Jiang Yuankui's side, he panted heavily and said to Jiang Yuankui. As he spoke, Jianghu even passed a jade pendant to Jiang Yuankui. This jade pendant was a protective magic treasure passed down from ancient times. If Jiang Yan hadn't been the first to break through to the celestial being realm, the old ancestor Jiang Yan wouldn't have given him this jade pendant. But now, he hadn't even warmed up the jade pendant when 4 or 5 extremely clear cracks appeared on it. Clearly, it was on the verge of breaking apart. The might of a single attack was actually so terrifying. At this time, if Jiang Yuankui still didn't understand the seriousness of the matter, then he would truly be the clan chief for nothing. Therefore, after exchanging a glance with Jiang Yuankui abruptly raised his right hand and shouted, "The enemy is here! Everyone, please form the yin-yang 6 directions formation with me." After saying that, the Jiang clan celestials immediately formed groups of 6 and surrounded Xiangshan Island square in all directions. Over 300 celestials. How magnificent of a scene would that be? But Wuxia acted as if he was watching a monkey show. Even though he was surrounded, there was still a faint smile on his face. When the golden light of the serene afterglow peak soared into the clouds and the heavenly stars formation was completely activated, Wuxia slowly flew into the air under the gazes of the crowd. At this moment, the entire crowd was silent. Jiang Yuankui did not say anything. While everyone was waiting in formation, they were also silently examining the mysterious young man in front of them. Finally, Wuxia was the first to speak, breaking the silence. I am the divine general of Tiandu, Wuxia. Under the orders of Yuhuan Tianzuan, I have specially come to condemn you all. No one answered him. Because when they heard the two words Tiandu, all kinds of complicated expressions appeared on their faces. Wuxia was not in a hurry to continue speaking. He only slowly swept his gaze over the crowd. But those who were swept by his gaze involuntarily lowered their heads, not daring to look at him. At this moment, Wuxia was simply like Kangxi in disguise. When he announced his name, everyone was stunned by his identity. Tiandu. For the Jiang clan's clansmen, that was a distant place, a place that they yearned for day and night. But now, under the lead of their ancestor, they took the initiative to go against Tiandu. Wasn't this a rebellion? You are merely descendants of sinners, but the divine ancestor thought of the bitter cold of the lower realm, so he spared you all and allowed you to ascend to the upper realm. In the blink of an eye, the divine ancestor has already passed away. You all do not know how to cherish the divine ancestor's kindness. Instead, you all think of ways to destroy the foundations of the divine ancestor and prevent the divine ancestor from opening. This crime is unforgivable. When Wuxia was alone, he would always talk nonsense like a crazy person. That was why their teacher always said that he would not grow up and was far from Baihong. But when he was serious, his body would erupt with a powerful aura that was enough to suffocate people. He just silently floated in the air. Every word he said was like a heavy hammer, smashing into everyone's chest. Everyone lowered their heads in silence. They were all waiting for their ancestor to speak, but for some reason, their ancestor did not do anything today. Only Jianghu, after taking a deep look at the jade pendant in his hand, he spat at Wu Su angrily. Then he scolded sternly. Bah! Arrogant brat! After calling us sinners every time you open your mouth, dare I ask what our Jiang clan has done wrong? Hearing this, Wuxia chuckled. Just as he was about to reply, Jianghu continued, Don't talk to me about the upper and lower realms. I have seen all the changes in the world. In the past, when Tiandu was strong, the Jiang clan could only become sinners and be trapped in this bitter cold. Didn't you all look down on the lower realm? Why are you here today? I think you know that too. Things are different now. Jinling's jade tree is famous. Qinhuai's waterside pavilion blooms early, but who knew that it would disappear so easily? I saw him build a vermilion tower, I saw him host guests, and I saw him collapse. I think you all are grasshoppers after autumn. You won't be able to jump around for long. Hearing this, the smile on Wu Su's face disappeared. After coldly looking at Jianghu, Wuxia raised the apricot yellow flag in his hand again. Seeing this, the Jiang clan immediately acted as if they were facing a great enemy. As long as Jiang Yuankue gave the order, they would attack at the same time. They had to kill him instantly. Don't tell me you all really think that destroying the 5-directional holy palace and extracting the spiritual energy foundation can stop the gate of heaven from opening? That's wishful thinking. How foolish. Today, I will say this. Because of what you all have done today, when the gate of heaven reopens, it will be the time when this world will be plunged into misery and suffering. When autumn comes, on the 8th day of the 9th month, all flowers will be killed. Chapter 379. Shoshan Island was in a mess. 300 celestial beings stood in formation. Everyone stared at the young man in the sky above the square from afar. Divine General. After hearing his last sentence, Jianghu knew that he couldn't let him continue. There was no point in saying more. If a random Divine General was enough to make everyone cower in fear, wouldn't the Jiang clan go for wool and come home shorn? Therefore, Jianghu hesitated for a while. Then, a fierce look flashed across his face. He walked past Jiang Yuankue and ordered everyone, Formation! In that instant, the mountains rumbled, the valleys responded, and the wind blew. Dust swirled, and flags fluttered. How magnificent was the sight of 300 celestial beings. No matter how arrogant Wuxia was, facing such a large number of enemies, he had to be on full alert. For the first time, his body showed signs of true yuan fluctuation. Attack! Jianghu didn't give Wuxia too much time to prepare. After giving the order, he ordered everyone to attack with all their might. The surging Zhan Yuan gushed toward Wuxia like a torrential flood. Seeing this, Wuxia did not have any intention of running away. Because at this moment, he was the divine general of Tiandu. He represented Tiandu to punish the sinners. If he ran away, where would Tiandu's face be? He could not back down from this battle. Come on, let me take a look. What gave you the courage to go against Tiandu? Wuxia was so angry that his hair and beard fluttered. He roared into the sky. The yellow flag in his hand was like a balloon. It expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, he quickly took out a pill from his Sumeru mustard seed bag and stuffed it into his mouth. Shenyang snow-melting pill. This pill was a 9th grade spirit pill. Its effect was that when a cultivator burned their essence blood, the effect of the essence blood would be greatly enhanced. This would allow the cultivator to explode with power far greater than before. The 9th grade Central Wuji apricot yellow flag in one hand and the 9th grade Shenyang snow-melting pill in the other. Wuxiu's combat power was not inferior to Chen Shi's. Therefore, just as the Jiang clan's attack was about to arrive, the yellow flag in Wuxiu's hand exploded with a dazzling yellow light. The light was so bright that it almost dyed the entire sky. The 5 direction flags. Earth is supreme. Heaven Empress Earth. Heaven Empress. Heaven pure will not fail. With a wave of the flag, the entire earth trembled. Countless mud pillars suddenly extended from the ground and turned into a huge mud wall, surrounding Wuxiu. The attacks of the Jiang clan's celestials all landed on the earth wall. Boom, 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 boom. Dust flew everywhere, and sand and gravel flew everywhere. Huge explosions sounded in the sky above Shoshan Island one after another. That scene, it was like an air raid during World War II. The rumbling did not stop for even a moment. In truth, Jiang Zhengqing was well aware that the other party's strength far surpassed his own. Therefore, if they did not make use of their numerical advantage, they would have no hope at all. Therefore, after the first round of attacks, Jiang Zhengqing didn't wait for everyone to catch their breath before he roared fiercely, "Don't stop! Beat him up! Even if we have to destroy Shoshan Island today, we must bury this bastard here. Jiang family, prosper without decline." At this moment, the ancestral 6-trigram incantation of the Jiang clan could be considered to have completely bloomed. They were the origin of the necromancers and also the masters of the Tao of sorcery. Therefore, all kinds of 5 elemental sorcery were like a storm, smashing towards the center of the square. One round after another, as if there would never be a day of rest. Finally, some people had to stop temporarily because they had used up too much energy. However, they stopped in the air and gasped for breath. Because Jiang Zhengqing was a level higher than everyone else, when everyone had no choice but to stop, he was still crazily attacking the center of the square. The dust raised by the explosions blocked everyone's sight. From afar, the entire sky above Shoshan Island was filled with a layer of dust, as if a sandstorm was coming. Second granduncle, stop. Seeing Jiang Zhengqing continuously attacking like a madman, Jiang Yuankue quickly reached out to stop him. Although Jiang Yuankue did not want to believe that this person would be so stupid as to stand in the center and let them attack as they wished. But the truth was right in front of him. There were no signs of true essence fluctuations in the air above the square. However, out of caution, Jiang Yuankue did not immediately go forward to check the situation. Instead, he continued to wait patiently outside. Under Jiang Yuankue's persuasion, Jiang Zhengqing finally stopped. However, after he took 2 deep breaths, he frowned and said with a serious face, "Yuankue, I think something is wrong," as expected. Before Jiang Zhengqing finished speaking, a burst of bright light suddenly exploded in the center of the square. Immediately after, Wuxiu's voice was heard again. "You guys. Is that all you've got?" Suddenly, a gust of wind came from nowhere. After the smoke dissipated, Wuxiu's figure appeared in front of everyone's eyes again. "Could it be that you guys have been in the lower realm for too long? So you don't even know how to fight? If that's the case, why don't you just bind yourselves and ask me to be lenient?" If Wuxiu was a fully armed modern special force, then the Jiang family was simply a primitive warrior who only knew how to rely on brute force to fight. After all, it was because the earth had been desolate for too long that civilization had degenerated to a primitive society. Spells, pills, talismans, refining weapons, setting up formations, and poison. Other than the spell inheritance that had not been cut off, what was left of the Jiang family? It could be said that this was a war between a modern civilization and a primitive society. In fact, the Wuji apricot yellow flag was not a killing magic treasure at all. Instead, it was mainly used for defense like Shui Xiang's silk satin. Therefore, when the Jiang family attacked, Wuxia only needed to hide under the protection of the Wuji apricot yellow flag. If the enemy advances, I will retreat. If the enemy stays, I will disturb. If the enemy is tired, I will attack. If the enemy retreats, I will chase. The 16 words formula for guerrilla warfare, even in the immortal cultivation world, was an absolutely correct tactic. Unfortunately, there was no one in the entire Jiang family who knew about magic treasures, so everyone could only waste their energy. Therefore, it was time for Wuxia to show his power. He waved the Wuji apricot yellow flag in his hand, and 4 giant natives made of mud suddenly emerged from the ground, then attacked the Jiang family members in all directions. With the natives holding back, Wuxia completely transformed into a war god, holding the apricot yellow flag and rushing towards Jiang Zhengqing's direction. To catch bandits, first catch the leader. Seeing Wuxia's aggressive momentum, Jiang Zhengqing and Jiang Yuankue could not help but be shocked. Even if they were at their peak, they would not be able to fight against Wuxia. Now that they had lost more than half of their strength, how would they dare to fight Wuxia head-on? Without even needing to communicate, the two flew in different directions, preparing to temporarily avoid the attack. Seeing this, Wuxia could not help but laugh. Run! Where do you run to? As his voice fell, Wuxia waved the apricot yellow flag in his hand, and directly sent out 2 waves of true origin towards the back of the two. Just at this critical juncture, a wave of true origin suddenly shot out from the forest below, like a sharp arrow, and directly shot towards Wuxia in the sky. Jiang Zhengqing felt something strange behind him. Looking back, he just happened to see that wave of true origin pass through Wuxia's body, and drew a thin line of blood in the air. Jiang Zhengqing widened his eyes, and only felt that his mind was blank. Chapter 380. The Old Ancestor Came. Once those words were said, everyone seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. A trace of indescribable excitement immediately appeared on their faces. After all, the old ancestor Jiang Yan was the current spiritual totem of the Jiang clan. Now that the Jiang clan raised the flag and wanted to become enemies with Tiandu, everyone was fighting fiercely. Only the old ancestor was nowhere to be seen, so it was inevitable that everyone would have doubts in their hearts. They could clearly choose to ascend to the higher realms, so why did they have to go against Tiandu? What was the reason? In reality, everyone knew very well why the old ancestor did this. But as long as the old ancestor did not appear, this question would always linger like a nightmare, forever shrouding everyone's heart. The most frightening thing in a battle was to lose morale. Luckily, the old ancestor finally appeared. The spiritual totem was erected again, and everyone's heart was filled with an extremely strong fighting spirit, causing the slightly dispirited morale to instantly soar to the peak. The majestic Jiang clan, flourishing without decline. The giant natives summoned by Wuxia had no life to begin with, and each one of them had to face the encirclement of dozens of celestials. Thus, under the continuous encirclement of everyone, the natives could only collapse one by one, turning into a pile of rubble and mud that fell to the ground again. Then the celestials of the Jiang clan who had freed up their hands immediately turned towards Wuxia's direction, firmly surrounding him in the center. Back to Wuxia's side. As one of the best 1,000-year-old Go in Chen Shi's heart, Jiang Yan was indeed very patient. He already knew everything that happened on the island, but he still did not immediately stand out to lead everyone to besiege Wuxia. Instead, he allowed everyone to suffer a huge loss at Wuxia's hands. He was Go, and also waiting. Just waiting for the moment Wuxia let down his guard, and then launching a fatal attack. For a smart person, 10,000 meaningless attacks were clearly not as effective as a single fatal attack. Just in terms of cultivation, Jiang Yan, who had lived for over 1,000 years, was clearly stronger than Wuxia. Thus, when he steeled his heart to launch a sneak attack, even with the protection of the Wuji apricot yellow flag, Wuxia was still unable to completely dodge the attack. But fortunately, Wuxia reacted very quickly. Furthermore, his clothes were defensive magic treasures. Therefore, the killing move that Jiang Yan had been holding back for a long time only managed to cut off a piece of flesh from his waist. Immortal cultivators did have the ability to regenerate broken limbs. But this takes time to recover slowly. It is impossible to be like Wolverine and Deadpool, whose bodies were clearly chopped into minced meat, but it didn't take long for them to return to their original appearance. That was unscientific. For immortal cultivators, the body was merely a vessel, while the soul was the absolute core. However, once they lost the protection of the vessel, their divine soul would gradually weaken until it completely disappeared from the world. Therefore, for high-level immortal cultivators, the physical body was also an extremely important part of them. It was absolutely impossible for them to abandon it easily. This was the first time Wuxia had suffered such a serious injury. Wuxia lowered his head and looked at the wound on his waist. His face was as cold as a poker card. He silently took out a healing pill from his Sumeru mustard seed bag and swallowed it. Then, he turned his gaze to the forest below. Subsequently, a figure slowly flew into the air under Wuxia's gaze. Zhang Yuankue took a closer look. After seeing the person's appearance, he couldn't help but exclaim, "Fengyan? Why are you here?" Because of the previous act of snatching the Adumbra flower, Zhang Fengyan had been punished by the old ancestor to meditate in the dry pool, so Zhang Yuankue didn't expect to see his son here. However, Jiang Zhengqing immediately figured out the reason, so he immediately cupped his hands and saluted, "Zhengqing greets the old ancestor." After hearing this, Zhang Yuankue was stunned on the spot. At this time, he finally reacted, "Jiang Yan, Jiang Fengyan." It was only a difference of one word, but their identities were worlds apart. Jiang Fengyan was a direct descendant of the Jiang family, so the only similarity between the two was probably the blood flowing in their bodies. Bloodline possession. It must be a bloodline possession. The old ancestor forcibly took away Jiang Fengyan's body and erased his divine soul at the same time. Yuan Kue, the Jiang family has reached a critical moment of life and death. This old man has to do this. If I don't do this, not only Fengyan, but even you and the tens of thousands of Jiang family members on Daiyu Island will die in the hands of this person. I hope you can figure this out and don't hold a grudge because of this. Jiang Fengyan flew to the side of the two, then said this to Jiang Yuankue through voice transmission. After hearing this, Jiang Yuankue looked up to the sky and screamed in extreme pain. Then, as if he had gone mad, he turned around and flew in the direction of Xianxia Peak. Yuankue. Seeing this, Jiang Zhengqing stepped forward to stop Jiang Yuankue. However, before he could turn around, Jiang Fengyan directly called out to him. "Vengqing, the enemy is right in front of us, don't be distracted. After this matter, I will explain to him. I only hope that Yuankue can understand my painstaking efforts." Since the old ancestor had said so, Jiang Zhengqing naturally couldn't say anything more, so he could only nod and respond, "Yes." The three of them seemed to have said a lot, but in fact, they used the secret method of voice transmission. Therefore, from Wuxia's injury to Jiang Fengyan's appearance, only a few breaths had passed. And at this time, Wuxia also used a spiritual pill to stop his injury. Bloodline possession, is it? Come on, then let me see. Old man, other than sneak attacks, what else do you have? If Wuxia was an elegant young master before, then at this moment, he had already become an injured beast. So after a roar, Wuxia picked up the apricot yellow flag and pounced directly at Jiang Yan. Seeing this, Jiang Yan did not retreat. Instead, he suddenly made hand signs and shouted loudly, "I am Jiang Yan, the ancestor of the illustrious clan, listen to my orders." Following his order, the Jiang clan celestials present all made hand signs one after another. Jiang Yan was at the core of the formation, and he felt hundreds of huge true essences constantly surging towards him. And the power of the yin-yang six directions formation was truly displayed after he, the backbone, appeared. Brilliant heavenly might. Transform into divine thunder. 6 lines of space, rebuking without arrogance. In an instant, lightning appeared in the void, and heavenly thunder rumbled. Jiang Yan held the thunder in his hand, and his eyes were wide open in anger, as if a god had descended. Let me emphasize again. This is not an entertainment stay-at-home dad, nor a restaurant stay-at-home dad. This is returning from cultivation to become a stay-at-home dad. The theme determines that I can't be a daily life, and the main storyline is not changed at all, right? As a dignified soul formation cultivator, isn't it too ridiculous to go to the entertainment industry? I have my own main storyline, my own plot arrangement, but when it was published, because I was too concerned about the readers' comments, I lost myself. Before, I even mistakenly thought that Cultivation and Stay-at-Home Dad were conflicting. Until now. Only then did I realize what was going on. I am not money. I can't make everyone like me. I can only do my best to write the story I want to write. If you think it is good, please recommend it to your friends after reading it. If you think it is not good, then please put it aside and find another book you like to read. I only hope that we can meet again in the future. Because this is only my first book, and definitely not my last. I have always been working hard to improve myself, hoping that I can write better in the future so that you will be satisfied. Sincerely. In addition, the part about Nian will not be lost, and will instead be written better. Because when I think of the later plot, I feel that I have found the surging passion I had when I first opened the book. Since I am a Cultivation Stay-at-Home Dad, then I will bring out the characteristics of a Cultivation Stay-at-Home Dad. Don't mention the word Stay-at-Home Dad, everyone will think of the same thing. Chapter 381. Yin and Yang, 5 elements, 6 lines, 8 trigrams. The 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other. The 5 elements did not simply refer to the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. It referred to a cultivator's basic understanding of the laws of heaven and earth. Only by understanding the 5 elements yin and yang could one officially step into the door of immortality. Among the 5 elements, thunder represented the Zhan trigram, which was wood. Even a blind man could see that Wuxia's cultivation method was based on earth. Therefore, Jiang Yan did not even need to think too much, and directly took out the Jiang clan's trump card, 9 Heavens Thunder Technique. At that moment, Jiang Yan, who held the thunder in his hand, was so powerful that it almost completely suppressed Wuxia's limelight. Seeing this, Wuxia's face suddenly revealed a trace of a sinister smile. Without hesitation, he took out another magic treasure from his Sumeru mustard seed bag, White Bone Soul Summoning Banner. Then, with the flag in his right hand and the banner in his left hand, he continued to rush in the direction of Jiang Yan. It had to be mentioned here. There was actually a difference between a banner and a flag. A flag was hung horizontally like a national flag, while a banner was hung vertically. Horizontal as a flag, vertical as a banner. There seemed to be no difference between the two, but in reality, there was a big difference. That was because the flag was yang, and the banner was yin. Therefore, the moment Wuxia took out the White Bone Soul Summoning Banner, a black gas suddenly surged out from his body, as if thousands of vengeful spirits were flowing within. With one hand, the apricot yellow flag was mighty and righteous. With the other, the White Bone Soul Summoning Banner was awe-inspiring. Since Jiang Yan wanted to use the 5 elements to restrain him, then he might as well combine yin and yang, and directly surpass the 5 elements. Under the contrast of one good and one evil, one yin and one yang, Wuxia was like a combination of gods and demons, brazenly facing the 9 heavens thunder in Jiang Yan's hands. A battle between Yuanying and Yang. Thunder against yin and yang earth. This battle was so exciting that it could be said to be a once-in-a-lifetime event. However, just as Xiaoshan Island was collapsing and the sky was darkening, Jiang Zhengqing's figure quietly appeared on Xianxia Peak. As the Jiang clan's only celestial being, he did not follow the old ancestor to face the great enemy together. Instead, he came here to find Jiang Yuankue. As soon as he stepped into the ancestral hall, he saw Jiang Yuankue kneeling in front of the Jiang clan's ancestral tablets with a stupefied expression. It was unknown what he was thinking. Seeing this, Jiang Zhengqing couldn't help but fly into a rage. He directly grabbed Jiang Yuankue's collar and lifted him up from the ground. The Jiang clan is currently facing a great calamity. For this reason, the old ancestor did not hesitate to save up for 1,000 years. He possessed Feng Yan just to mediate with that thief for a moment. But you, as the patriarch, are unable to recover from this setback. Could it be that you want to watch as that bastard kills all of my Jiang clan's clansmen in order to resolve the hatred in your heart? For a father, what kind of blow would the pain of losing a child be? Not to mention the ordinary people, even Jiang Yuankue, who was the clan leader, had completely lost his soul under this blow. Therefore, after hearing Jiang Zhengqing's reprimand, Jiang Yuankui smiled bitterly and said, "Second granduncle must be joking. Yuankui's strength is low. Even if I go, I can only stand on the side and cheer for old ancestor." Slap! Before Jiang Yuankui could finish his words, Jiang Zhengqing slapped him in the face and sent him flying more than 10 meters away. He even slid on the ground for a long time before finally coming to a stop after hitting a pillar. "I don't have time to talk nonsense with you. Let me tell you. The Jiang clan is facing a great calamity. If old ancestor can't defeat that bastard, even if I have to run away before the battle, I will come back and kill you first." Hearing this, Jiang Yuankui lay on the ground without moving. It seemed that his heart was already dead. Seeing him like this, Jiang Zhengqing was furious. Just as he was about to go up and hit Jiang Yuankui to wake him up, a series of shocking rumbles suddenly came from outside the house. Like an earthquake, the entire Daiyu island trembled, and the tiles of the ancestral temple rustled and fell. Obviously, the battle had reached its climax. Since the battle was so fierce, Jiang Zhengqing, who was the main force, naturally did not dare to delay for too long. Therefore, he could only stomp his foot hard and leave a sentence before turning around and flying out of the ancestral temple. "Old ancestor asked me to pass on a message to you. If you care about the Jiang clan's tens of thousands of years of foundation, then stand up and think of a way to find a strong ally for the Jiang clan to solve the current crisis." Jiang Zhengqing left. After a long while, Jiang Yuankui crawled up from the ground with some difficulty. "Strong ally?" Even though Jiang Zhengqing did not say who that person was, Jiang Yuankui instantly understood the old ancestor's meaning. However, he did not act immediately. Instead, he stood where he was and seriously thought about it. In fact, Jiang Yuankui had been very clear-headed the whole time. And because he was clear-headed, he had always had a question in his heart. Everything that was happening now, was it all part of the old ancestor's plan? Perhaps the possession of Feng Yan was also part of it? This was a very scary guess, and it made Jiang Yuankui shudder. He could not be sure. He could not be sure. That was because, after all, the blood of the Jiang clan still flowed in his body. Jiang Yuankui hesitated for a while with a complicated expression. In the end, he still could not cut off the fetters that originated from the depths of his bloodline. He turned around and walked toward the back of the ancestral temple. From the perspective of communication technology, modern technology had indeed surpassed immortal cultivation techniques. Jiang Yuankui was only a diviner. Therefore, if he wanted to instantly contact Xianxia on the other side of the world, other than a phone call, Jiang Yuankui really could not think of any other way. Fortunately, Xianxia had left his phone number before. Otherwise, Jiang Yuankui really would not be able to call the heavens or the earth. When the phone rang, Xianxia was busy in the courtyard counting the medicinal ingredients. He was preparing to officially start refining medicine at night after Nian Nian fell asleep. "Hello? Who is this?" "Mr. Chen, it's me, Jiang Yuankui." As soon as the call connected, Jiang Yuankui's slightly hoarse voice sounded from the other end of the phone. Hearing this, Xianxia immediately raised his eyebrows. After glancing at the Adumbra flower, he prepared to smile and say a few words of courtesy to Jiang Yuankui. However, before he could speak, Jiang Yuankui anxiously said, "The Jiang clan is in danger. Sir, please lend us a hand." Then, Jiang Yuankui quickly recounted the situation on Daiyu Island. After hearing this, Qianxi's face showed a hint of surprise. If they did not use an atomic bomb, even if the entire Wu Lian came out, they would not be able to do anything to the Jiang clan. He had already killed one heavenly general and captured 3 alive. Why was the 5th one so powerful all of a sudden? It was not that Qianxi looked down on by Hong. The main reason was that the old man from the Jiang clan was too cunning. Therefore, Qianxi did not think that the heavenly general would be able to gain any advantage from the old man. Looking at the situation now, the Jiang clan seemed to be unable to hold on any longer. Was that why they were asking him for help? "Alright, you guys hold on. I'll be there soon." In any case, he had taken something good from them. Naturally, Qianxi could not leave them in the lurch. Therefore, he agreed to Jiang Yuankui's request. He wanted to take this opportunity to see for himself. Chapter 382. After explaining the situation to Qin Ruoying, Xianxia set off for Daiyu Island. As soon as he got close to the waters around Daiyu Island, the sky suddenly darkened. Thunder and lightning intertwined, and torrential rain poured down. Thick fog rolled and rose from the surface of the sea, and the sea looked as if a tsunami was approaching. The waves surged over one after another, as if thousands of soldiers and horses were screaming, charging, and fighting. From time to time, waves soared into the sky, creating splashes of water that were more than 10 feet high. It was a spectacular sight that could not be described with words. Because the Jiang family had activated the protective array, even Xianxia could not see what was going on inside. When he forcibly broke open a crack in the array and was about to enter, a surging and violent wave of spirit qi suddenly surged out from the crack. Xianxia only sensed it briefly, but he frowned on the spot. This was the remnant aura after the great battle. At the same time, there were two distinct waves of true origin in this aura. This meant that the battle had reached its climax, and both parties did not even bother to restrain themselves. That was why so much spirit qi had leaked out. Xianxia could only hope that the old man could hold on for a while longer. After all, he was not here to collect the Jiang family's corpse. Thinking of this, Xianxia couldn't help but speed up his movements. With a flash, his entire person directly entered the grand formation. As soon as he entered the array, he saw a field of wildfire, thick smoke, and dilapidated walls. Daiyu Island. Where was the beautiful and spectacular sight that Xianxia had seen when he first came here? Xiaoshan Island, which was located at the westernmost tip of Daiyu Island, had half a mountain cut off. Many Jiang family members who were lucky enough to survive could only hold onto broken logs and cry in the sea. The island was shattered, and the mountain was flattened. The wildfire lit up the forest, and thick smoke filled the sky. The 17 islands of Daiyu Island. There were only 1 or 2 that had not been affected by the great battle. It could be said that heaven and earth had lost their color, and all living things were crying out in grief. It was a scene of misery and suffering. Rumble! Rumble! The battle was not over yet. Every time Wuxia and Jiang Yan clashed, the shockwaves produced by the collision of their Zhan Yuan would instantly destroy everything around them. Thunder continued to rumble, and the earth trembled violently. This scene was very similar to the carpet bombing tactics of World War II. Thus, compared to the Jiang clan's people in the sky, the Jiang clan's people with shallow cultivations below were the ones who were truly living in fear. They would never know when the next wave of attacks would befall them. They watched as their loved ones fell one after another in the aftermath of the great battle, or were directly smashed into meat paste by the dissipating true essence. The pitiful Jiang clansmen could only hug each other and cry bitterly. The Celestials couldn't protect them, and the old ancestor couldn't save them. Who else could save them? Blood flowed like a river and corpses piled up into mountains. Tens of thousands of people were in grief, their wails shaking the heavens. Looking at the tragic scenes in front of him, Xianxia, who was used to living in a civilized society, felt a little uncomfortable for a moment. Although he had only returned for a little over a year, he felt that he had been away from that cruel world for far too long. Until this moment, he finally found the feeling he had back then. The battle between Yuanying was indeed more terrifying than he had imagined. Both of them were experts. Experts naturally didn't need to be compassionate, nor did they need to be overcautious. However, looking at the grief-stricken mortals below, combined with what he had seen and heard during this period of time, Xianxia couldn't help but have a question in his mind. Strength and weakness were relative. Compared to humans, ants were extremely insignificant. But compared to immortal cultivators, what was the difference between an ordinary person and an ant? At this moment, Xianxia suddenly had an epiphany and completely forgot where he was. He actually fell into deep thought just like that. Strength was divided into strong and weak. All living things were equal. Even if they were as insignificant as ants, as a life between heaven and earth, they should receive the least amount of respect. In front of humans, ants were insignificant. But in front of planets like Tianxian or Earth, weren't humans also insignificant and insignificant? Any wave of tides was enough to affect all life on this planet. The dinosaurs were extinct. The ancient immortal cultivators were lucky enough to escape. In front of heaven and earth, all living things were equal. Whether it was the auntie selling vegetables on the street or him, the divine Lord of Dawn. What was the difference between the two in essence? Cultivation was a kind of detachment. In that case, What level of cultivation did he have to reach before he could be considered an absolute expert? Xianxia floated quietly in mid-air. Suddenly, his heart trembled violently. Immediately after, a feeling of enlightenment rushed into Xianxia's heart. Through the accumulated tribulations of the mystifying scripture, he was enlightened in an instant. Understanding one's heart and seeing one's nature. Enlightenment. He hadn't had this feeling for a long time. Under such circumstances, under such conditions, he could actually have an epiphany? One had to know that epiphany was a very mysterious thing. It had nothing to do with cultivation, but it was extremely important and would be of great help to cultivation. Chapter 383. This was how Mr. Chen, who was the center of attention, appeared in the sky above Diyu Island. Then, he flew to Jiang Zhengqing's side. Perhaps it was because he had just had an epiphany, but Xianxia was in a good mood. He even nodded at Jiang Zhengqing. Seeing this, Jiang Zhengqing smiled bitterly and shook his head. Mr. Chen was in a good mood. The mood of this group of people was very heavy. Hey, where's your ancestor? Is he okay? After all, Xianxia owed him a favor. Naturally, he had to express his gratitude. But he looked left and right, but did not see Jiang Yan's figure, which was why he asked this question. I'm here. Mr. Meng, I'm very happy that you're concerned about me. Hearing this, Jiang Yan forced a smile and responded. At this time, Xianxia finally noticed the young man beside him. If he remembered correctly, this young man was the one who wanted to take the Adumbra flower away from him. Wait a minute. This kid was not even a diviner, right? How did he become so powerful after not seeing him for a few days? Feeling the surge of true origin in Jiang Yan's body, even Xianxia could not help but be stunned for a moment. Immediately after that, he seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He could not help but ask tentatively, bloodline possession? You're very knowledgeable, Mr. Meng. Hearing this, Jiang Yan nodded straightforwardly, confirming his guess. The so-called bloodline possession was actually a taboo technique. It went against the rules, so it was not tolerated by the world. A very simple example could be given. If a grandfather took away his grandson's body, how should the father address his son? Should he address his son's body as his father? Or should he address his father's soul as his son? No matter who it was, they would not be able to accept such a strange thing. But even so, bloodline possession was still a common occurrence. After all, compared to outsiders, the possessor and the possessor shared the same bloodline. After possession, it was naturally easier for the possessor to unleash his original strength. Looking at Jiang Fengyan, who had a young face but was extremely mature in his behavior, Jiang Fengyan felt a chill run down his spine. Xianxia was speechless. However, this was someone else's family matter after all. As an outsider, he had no right to interfere. In fact, Xianxia had long felt that this old man was very sinister, but he did not expect this old man to be even more sinister than he had imagined. The old man had used the soul crystal to live for thousands of years. Xianxia thought that he had taken over the body, so he could only stay in the soul crystal for the rest of his life. He didn't expect the old man to have such a trick up his sleeve. It wasn't until today that he seized his great-great-great-grandson's body. Jiang Fengyan was a good material. He could be considered to have excellent aptitude. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to take half a step into the Deva realm at such a young age. With such aptitude, if placed in the heavenly jade domain, no matter which sect, he would be listed as a core disciple. Thinking of this, Xianxia couldn't help but come up with a guess. Could it be? The old man had predicted that with the revival of spirit qi, there was a perfect candidate for possession, so he simply took advantage of this opportunity to seize Jiang Fengyan's body openly? He trapped himself in the soul crystal and tortured himself for thousands of years, just to welcome the glory of tomorrow? What a vicious heart! What a deep mind! People who were vicious to others were not scary. People who were vicious to themselves were the ones who were truly scary. Xianxia's mind was in a whirl, but his face did not show any abnormality. His conversation with Jiang Yan was short, so it did not take up too much time. After saying that, Xianxia turned his gaze to Wuxia. After all, this was his real enemy. It had to be said that the atmosphere above Diyu Island was somewhat stifling. Wuxia was still holding 2 flags in his hands, flying alone not far away from the Jiang family. A dignified divine general of Tiandu was now covered in injuries, and he no longer had the sage-like aura he had before. However, even Wuxia's body emitted a sense of exhaustion, let alone the Jiang clan's people. Xianxia only took a cursory glance, and found that the Jiang family's pride of 300 divine warriors had been reduced to just over 100. Moreover, they all looked dispirited, and there was even some despair and fear in their eyes. It was obvious that the Jiang family had paid a heavy price in this battle. It could be said that they had suffered a great loss. If it wasn't for his appearance that made the 2 sides stop fighting for a while, then it would not be long before. Then, Daiyu Island would be completely wiped off the map by Wuxia. Alright, you guys go and rest. Leave this to me. Xianxia twisted his neck, and after saying that, he directly flew forward a short distance, leaving himself to face Wuxia alone. This action clearly showed his attitude. Swap. From now on, Wuxia's enemy was no longer the Jiang family, but him, Chen Shi, Mr. Chen. Actually, Chen Shi's idea was very simple. No matter what secrets were hidden, when the spirit energy tide appeared, Ying would feel dizzy and sick. It was also because Ying would feel dizzy and sick that he had to avoid this situation. How could he avoid it? Wasn't it just to disperse the spirit energy tide? Other than that, whether it was Tiandu or the Jiang family, it had nothing to do with him. In short, as long as he was on Earth, the spirit energy tide would not appear for a day. But, if the spirit energy tide did not appear, how could the heavenly gate open? How would the generals of Tiandu descend on Earth? This was simply a paradox. Chapter 384. Under Chen Shi's watch, Wuxia suddenly turned into a cloud of dust and dissipated in front of everyone's eyes. Chen Shi had come all the way here and had barely exchanged a few words. How could he allow this guy to escape so easily? Therefore, the moment Wuxia's figure dissipated, Chen Shi drew his sword. As soon as the sword was drawn, the sky suddenly darkened. The long sword turned invisible, and the twilight in the sky silently closed. Heaven and earth were silent. It was as if only one person, one sword, and one grain of sand were left. This was the earth escape technique of the 5 elements. It was also the escape technique that Wuxia was proud of. As soon as this technique was drawn, Wuxia's entire body was like thousands of dust and gravel in the air. It was invisible and unfathomable. But it was a pity. Wuxia had underestimated Chen Shi's strength. If he had left before Chen Shi arrived, Daiyu Island would have been like his back garden. He could come and go as he pleased. Since Chen Shi was already here, it was destined that he would not be able to be as relaxed as before. Chen Shi still used the first move of the moonlight sword technique. The sword hid the void. Before the sword was drawn, the sword aura was hidden and not released. As soon as the sword was drawn, it was like a long river hanging upside down, soaring into the sky and into the clouds. Its speed was so fast that it was simply shocking. Jiang Zhengqing was completely stunned by this sword. Even when he was chased by Chen Shi's flying sword all over the sky before, he did not feel that Mr. Chen was much stronger than he was. Until he saw this sword, Jiang Zhengqing finally understood the gap between himself and Mr. Chen. It was like the gap between heaven and earth. The move was still the same move. However, in the past year or so, Chen Shi's condition had improved qualitatively. The demeanor of a divine lord was completely displayed at this moment. After Chen Shi slashed out with her sword, the sword light suddenly transformed into thousands of identical sword shadows as it flew through the air. These sword shadows didn't look very real, as if they didn't really exist in this world, so people mistakenly thought that these sword shadows were only the refraction of light, which was why they formed the illusion of one real sword and 10,000 fake swords. It looked like a kaleidoscope. Of all the people present, only Jiang Yan knew what was good for him. Marvelous, truly marvelous. Jiang Yan let out a heartfelt sigh. At this time, the sword gleam and the thousands of sword shadows had already arrived at Wuxia's previous location. One grain of sand, one world. One leaf, one Bodhi. Since Wuxia was trying to split himself into thousands of clones and escape from Chen Shi's sight using the Earth Escape technique, Chen Shi decided to use the Earth Escape technique. In that case, Xianxia could only unleash 10,000 swords simultaneously, using the real sword to lock onto Wuxiu's qi dynamic, and the virtual sword to sweep through all things. Not a single grain of sand was spared. Bang! There was a silent and violent explosion. It was as if a piece of the sky had been forcefully ripped out, leaving a strange vacuum zone in the sky above Daiyu Island. In this vacuum, there was no air, no dust, and even the sunlight seemed to be frozen. And this was clearly the real. A sword concealing the void. Crack! Suddenly, the sky cracked open like a broken mirror. The light in that position began to distort, and a figure appeared out of thin air in the originally empty sky. First, it was a pair of legs, then thighs, waist, chest, neck, and finally, head. Wuxiu's figure slowly appeared. You! Wuxiu stared at his own body with wide eyes, and his face suddenly revealed an expression as if he had seen a ghost. To put it bluntly, this was the ultimate life-saving technique that he relied on to survive. How could it be so easily broken by Xianxia? At this moment, Wuxiu was really panicking. It's still so early, my daughter hasn't even finished school. Why are you in such a hurry? After twirling his sword around, Xianxia said to him with a smile. Wuxiu was silent. After taking a deep look at Xianxia, he said with a solemn expression, Impossible, it's impossible for someone like you to appear in the lower realm. You, where did you come from? Wuxiu looked at Xianxia with a strange expression. But after Xianxia heard this, she only smiled and didn't care at all. Me. I came from Shangjing. He was born and raised on Earth, so why would he need to explain himself to anyone? Wuxiu did not believe him, but he did not argue with him. Instead, he quietly took out the white bone spirit summoning banner from his Sumeru mustard bag. It seemed like he had accepted his fate. Since he could not run, he could only fight. Seeing this, Xianxia nodded with a smile and signaled him to make his move. The battle was about to begin. The members of the Jianghu family held their breaths and looked at them nervously. They had already changed from participants to spectators. However, just when everyone thought that Wuxiu was going to start fighting, Wuxiu suddenly did something that shocked everyone. After he took out the white bone spirit summoning banner, he slapped himself hard on the chest, causing himself to spit out a mouthful of blood. The blood stained the banner, making the patterns on the banner even more eerie. Blood sacrifice? After seeing Wuxiu use his blood to dye the white bone spirit summoning banner red, even Xianxia could not help but stop smiling. His expression became more serious because of this. After all, the blood that Wuxiu spat out was not simple. That was his blood essence. Since cultivators could unleash power beyond normal by burning their blood essence, then similarly, if one used their blood essence to feed a magic treasure, it would be able to unleash power beyond its current level. Therefore, when Wuxiu's blood essence splashed onto the banner, a terrifying murderous aura exploded from the white bone spirit summoning banner. In an instant, the Wuxiu flag was like a drop of ink in water. Countless black smoke gushed out from the flag and spread rapidly. The black smoke quickly covered the sky. At this moment, Wuxiu's voice sounded from the black smoke. You're giving me 3 moves, right? If that's the case, I won't be polite with you. Wuxiu is here. Please enlighten me, mister. Following Wuxiu's roar, a surge of true essence surged out of the black smoke. Due to his previous promise, Xianxia could only use his sword to protect himself. His body lit up with a golden light, wanting to use it to block Wuxiu's attack. However, the violent impact that Xianxia imagined did not come. In his perception, the true essence in Wuxiu's body was like air in a balloon. Because it was so large, even the balloon burst. Then, the true origin energy surged out in all directions in a ring shape. Xianxia was stunned. Because he did not understand what Wuxiu's move was. Could it be that he was here to perform a fairy scattering flower? Xianxia was puzzled. Suddenly, he shuddered, and then suddenly came back to his senses. No. This guy is trying to escape. This time, it was really Xianxia's turn to be nervous. Not to mention anything else, if he really let Wuxiu escape from under his nose, he would lose a lot of face. Thinking of this, Xianxia immediately waved the sword in his hand. The sword light immediately shot out like the rising sun. Thousands of golden clusters of light instantly dispersed the black smoke and illuminated the entire sky. Unfortunately, Xianxia's reaction was still a beat slower. After the feint, Wuxia had long disappeared from his sight. Since the elder ancestor had expressed his opinion, no matter how uncomfortable everyone was, they could only bow to Xianxia and say, "Thank you for saving our lives, mister." Seeing this, Xianxia also said politely with an awkward expression, "Everyone, please rise. It's just a small matter. Everyone, there's no need to be so polite." Hearing this, Jiang Yan straightened his body, then lamented with a pained expression, "After this battle, the Jiang clan's vitality has been greatly damaged. Looking at this devastated Daiyu island, this old man's heart aches even more. All the sins were caused by this old man. This old man only hopes that this decision is not wrong. Otherwise, when this old man goes to the netherworld in the future, how can I face the ancestors of the Jiang clan? I, Jiang Yan, I am the sinner of the Jiang clan." Jiang Yan was filled with grief and indignation. In a moment of agitation, 2 streams of turbid tears fell from the old man's eyes. Looking at his bloodshot eyes, even Chen Shi, an outsider, could not bear to see it, let alone these reborn juniors of the Jiang clan. "Elder ancestor, you're right. Your decision is also for the sake of revitalizing the Jiang clan, and also for the sake of establishing the supreme glory of our clan in the future. The Jiang clan has not been defeated. As long as we are still alive, even if we are smashed to pieces, we will fight for a brand new future for the Jiang clan under your leadership. For the Jiang clan. Yes. Even if we are smashed to pieces, we will not retreat even half a step. F***CK the Divine General of Tiandu. In the future, if anyone dares to mention the word ascension in front of me, I will definitely not forgive him. From today onwards, the Jiang clan will definitely be at odds with Tiandu. Irreconcilable. Irreconcilable." When everyone saw Jiang Yan cry, the depression in their hearts immediately turned into endless grief and indignation. Suddenly, their morale was even higher than before. Xianxia stared dumbfoundedly at the scene in front of him. Everyone surrounded Jiang Yan and made bold statements. Jiang Yan, on the other hand, occupied Jiang Fengyan's young body. His face revealed an expression of great comfort. The more he looked at it, the more awkward he felt. Therefore, Xianxia couldn't help but sigh with emotion in his heart. This old fellow was really ruthless. He actually managed to win back the hearts of the people with just a few words. Although he didn't know the real purpose of Jiang Yan, Xianxia was now convinced by this old fellow from the bottom of his heart. No matter what Jiang Yan did, at least, he dared to raise the flag and become enemies with Tiandu, right? After Jiang Yan's post-battle speech, the fighting spirit of the Jiang clan was reignited. Xianxia was an outsider. Now that the crisis had been resolved, the Jiang clan was busy cleaning up the battlefield and rebuilding their home. Chapter 386. November 1st. Halloween in the West. Although many kindergartens were celebrating the Western Festival now, Donghua Gate Kindergarten did not promote the Western Festival in the park due to its pure bloodline. Therefore, for the children in the park, today was just a very ordinary day. The only thing worth noting was probably the temperature today. Because winter had arrived in Shangjing again. This year's winter was slightly later than last year, but as soon as November passed, the trees on both sides of the street shed their leaves one after another. They held up the graceful branches of the dead trees as if they were welcoming the coming winter. The cold wind blew through the corner of the street and rolled up some leaves that had not been cleared. Perhaps because the kindergarten was next to the Forbidden City, it was particularly quiet here. In the alley, pedestrians hurriedly walked by in 2s and 3s, as if they did not want to stay in the cold wind for a moment longer. The road outside the kindergarten was already filled with cars that came to pick up children from school. The parents sat in the cars to keep warm, and the cars breathed out heavy air. Only Xianxia stood alone in front of the gate. He was wearing a black windbreaker, and he was standing like a javelin. At first glance, Xianxia looked a bit like a security guard in front of the sales department. Ding, 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 as the pleasant bell rang, the park that had been asleep for a long time became lively again. The children were chattering about going home, and the teacher had to let them line up. Then, class by class, they came to the gate to look for their parents. Xianxia's side suddenly became lively. The parents scrambled to the side of the gate, wishing that they could immediately pull their children out from behind the iron gate. Xianxia was not in a hurry, and Nian Nian was not in a hurry either. This was because as soon as she walked out of the classroom, she saw Xianxia's figure as usual. Xianxia's figure, like a lighthouse on the sea, even if life was like waves and tides, he would always wait there firmly, silently waiting for Nian to appear. Dad! 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 Nian stood on the steps, excitedly waving her small hands at Xianxia. The two brothers followed behind her, one on her left and one on her right. They looked like two incomparably loyal little guardians. The children of the older class had to walk last, so after most of the children had left with their parents, the three little fellows ran out of the school gate under the guidance of the teacher. As soon as she crossed the iron gate, Xianxia didn't even have time to hug her before the little girl very sensibly turned around and said to the teacher with a grin, "Goodbye, teacher." "Bye, Nian. Wen Mingming, see you tomorrow." "Good. See you tomorrow." Unknowingly, the two brothers had developed the habit of not wanting to go to school if they didn't see Nian. When Xianxia patted her back and motioned for her to sit down, she would immediately obediently hug Xianxia's neck, and then coquettishly rub her head against Xianxia's head. The father and daughter whispered, and the brothers obediently followed behind them. In fact, the two of them had long been accustomed to this kind of life, so they didn't feel neglected. The two brothers were only a few months older than Nian, but under Gu Lao's constant education, the idea of giving in to your sister in everything was thoroughly planted in the depths of their hearts. Even the most common things in daily life, such as playing on the slide, the two brothers would let Nian play first, and then it would be their turn. This kind of feeling was also in line with the mood described by Li Bai in The Long Journey. Riding a bamboo horse, circling the bed to play with green plums. Living together for thousands of miles, the two young people have no quarrel. Childhood sweethearts. Childhood sweethearts. It was important to mention that childhood sweethearts had nothing to do with love, but it referred to the most innocent and pure friendship in the world. Children were still young, so naturally, it was impossible to speculate with adult thinking. But no matter what, humans were always social animals, and childhood without companions was incomplete. With the company of the two brothers, Nian's childhood would only be more fulfilling and happy. As for the future, that would be discussed in the future. Chapter 387. Now that the matters on Daiyu Island were settled, Qianxi's life returned to normal. The life of an ordinary person. Naturally, it was dull and repetitive. Nian spent most of her time in kindergarten, so the tea house was fully taken care of by Qiao Yuan. Qiao Yuan graduated from the best university in Wuxia, so a small tea house was not a problem for her. College students nowadays were very smart. Perhaps it was because Qiao Yuan had been living with Qianxi's family for a long time, so under the influence of Qianxi's family, Qiao Yuan looked more mature. She was very smart and knew what to listen to and what not to listen to. She also knew what to ask and what not to ask. As the saying goes, one is marked by the company one keeps. In Qiao Yuan's eyes, Qianxi's family was a hidden expert. Therefore, she did not know when it started, but there was a slight change in her thinking. In the past, Qiao Yuan was just an ordinary college student who had gone astray. She did not have any plans for the future. She always felt that after she graduated, she would find a suitable job according to her major. But now, Qiao Yuan did not want to live the rest of her life like this. Although Qianxi's family was always thinking about where to go and play, they did not set a good example for her at all. But under her rich imagination, she was able to completely fill in the background of Qianxi and her husband. The boss and lady boss. They were the modern version of Yang Gua and Xiaolong Nu. They had seen the prosperity of the world, crossed thousands of mountains and rivers, but in the end, they resolutely chose to retreat from the turbulence and live a seemingly ordinary, but happy and stable life with their loved ones. This was Qiao Yuan's dream, and also her role model in life. It was just that Qianxi's family had reached the end, while she had just started. Qiao Yuan was in her 4th year of university this year, and her mind was gradually becoming more active. In fact, not to mention Qianxi's family, even the retired old man Gu Lao was not simple. Although the two brothers looked like losers all day long, in fact, the moment they were born, they were already rich second-generation heirs. After all, the two of them had a courtyard house in Ho-Hai. It was very valuable. The little girl's mind was active, and she didn't know what Qianxi was busy with recently. so the responsibility of playing chess and chatting with Gu Lao naturally fell on her shoulders. Needless to say, this old man and young man actually got along quite well. Although Gu Lao didn't specifically teach Qiao Yuan anything, this little girl would always inadvertently learn things that couldn't be learned in school. Qiao Yuan was accumulating herself, just like the sweeping monks in the scripture depository. When she decided to leave the small tea house, it was time for her to set sail and usher in her brilliant life. Day after day, the cycle repeated itself. During this time, only a few scenic spots could be visited. Therefore, when Xianxia arrived at the park, there was not a single tourist in the huge park. This was not the first time he had been here. After the volcanic eruption cooled down, it would produce hard and impermeable basalt. After rainfall, it would generally produce a large lake. Therefore, the crater of Yellowstone Park was not protruding like Mount Fuji, but hidden under Yellowstone Lake. It could even be said that the entire Yellowstone Park was located on the crater of the volcano. Xianxia plunged into Yellowstone Lake, then followed the tunnel he had previously dug and quickly flew underground. The reason why it was called a supervolcano was because there was a magma reservoir with a diameter of 70 kilometers and a thickness of about 10 kilometers below the crater. In fact, a volcano was like a pressure cooker. Once the internal temperature rose to a certain level, the magma inside would instantly erupt. Xianxia set up a restriction in the magma reservoir. Then he put all the medicinal herbs he had collected during this period of time inside, such as the adumbra flower, bloodthorn grass, ginseng flowers, and all kinds of precious medicinal herbs that could be found in the world. Rare and precious treasures were produced from the earth. With the calcination and extraction of the underground fire essence, coupled with the continuous washing of the spirit energy of heaven and earth, the medicinal properties of the medicinal herbs could be released most effectively. Xianxia used the restriction to bind the medicinal properties and continuously quenched and compressed them together. The released medicinal properties would gradually change from a gaseous state to a liquid state, and finally to a solid state. When the medicinal herbs were exhausted, it was time for the elixir to be produced. What was the most important thing in alchemy? It was neither the medicinal herbs nor the technique. It was the last step before the elixir was formed. Because this was not an ordinary Chinese medicine, the moment the elixir was produced, it was like forcibly opening the lid of the pressure cooker. Boiling hot steam would instantly rush out. What Xianxia had to do was to smoothly take the elixir out of the furnace from this boiling hot steam. It sounded very simple. But what if the steam was replaced with the spirit energy of heaven and earth? The adumbra flower's grade was very high, and the elixir it produced was at least a 9th grade elixir. Thus, the accumulation of more than 3,000 years would completely erupt the moment the furnace was opened, along with the elixir. If Xianxia did not immediately take the elixir and use a secret technique to bind the elixir, then the medicinal properties of the elixir would rapidly dissipate, turning back into spirit energy and dissipating into heaven and earth. And precisely because of this, when cultivators refined high-grade elixirs, they would usually use a high-grade alchemy furnace. On one hand, it was to extract the medicinal properties more effectively. On the other hand, it was for safety reasons, using the alchemy furnace to resist the impact of the elixir when it was produced. Xianxia did not have an alchemy furnace, so he could only do it himself. This was a battle. It was a battle between Xianxia and the elixir. If he could not successfully take the elixir from the sudden explosion of spirit energy, if it was light, the elixir would be destroyed, and if it was heavy, But Zhang Yan had no intention of lighting a light at all. He continued to walk forward without stopping. He did not know how far he had walked before a faint light appeared at the end of the tunnel. Seeing this, a faint smile immediately appeared on Zhang Yan's face. At the end of the tunnel was a hall. There was only a faint green light source inside. From afar, it looked like a will-o'-the-wisp. It wandered in the hall while emitting a dim light. The moment Zhang Yan stepped into the hall, an old voice sounded in the hall. Who's here? It's me, Jiang Yan. The young man's voice was good. The energetic voice suddenly formed a sharp contrast with the lifeless voice. And as soon as Jiang Yan's voice fell, the hall that had been silent for a long time seemed to come alive again. Jiang Yan! Jiang Yan! Jiang Yan! Countless different voices sounded in every corner of the hall. Just like the many spectators sitting around, the moment they saw Jiang Yan appear, they cheered in unison. But these voices sounded like the voices of dried corpses. It was dry and shriveled, and at the same time, it was a bit harsh and hoarse. Jiang Yan seemed to enjoy the feeling of being the center of attention. After a while, he raised his arms and signaled for everyone to be quiet. The cheers stopped abruptly. At this time, Jiang Yan faced the center of the hall and said slowly, "I'm sure you all know what's going on outside. So now I just want to ask, the oath back then, is it still valid now?" After that, Jiang Yan began to look around. But no one answered him. The entire hall was silent. It was quiet and empty. It was as if he was the only living person in the room. Jiang Yan stood in the center of the hall and waited silently. After a long while, the old voice sounded again. "How can the oath of the 9 serenities be taken lightly? Since you have decided to come out, we will not continue to endure here. Go ahead and make the arrangements. If there is no doubt, I am willing to respect Jiang Yan as the co-leader of the 9 serenities and lead us to fight against Tiandu. Do you have any objections?" As soon as this question was asked, there was a sound of agreement in the hall. Seconded. 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 Just like the company's board of directors, Jiang Yan was officially elected as the new CEO of the 9 serenities. There were 9 levels of heaven and 9 levels of earth. There was Tiandu above and the 9 serenities below. The 2 words, 9 serenities, were the fundamental reason why Jiang Yan dared to go against Tiandu. For this, he was even willing to sacrifice the entire Jiang family and offer up all the remaining celestials on Daiyu Island for the 9 serenities to take. Because what he wanted. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.